Hello.
Hello.
Hello, Roz.
And welcome to Well, There's Your Problem. It's a podcast about engineering disasters with slides.
Yeah, and we promised you a big fucking disaster this time. We promised you a mega death. And we delivered.
This is a kill a death.
It's a kill a death, not a mega death. Mega death is a million deaths.
Or a decent-ish thrash metal band.
Yeah.
Don't come for me. Don't come for me. Anthrax are the king of thrash.
I'm Justin Rosniak. I'm the person who's talking right now. My pronouns are he and him. Okay, go.
I'm Alice Gorville-Kelly. I am the person talking now. My pronouns are she and her.
Yay, Liam. Hi.
Liam.
I'm Liam Anderson. My pronouns are he and him. And we have a guest.
We have a guest.
Back again. It's Kyle.
Yes. Kyle Hudak. My pronouns are he and him.
You may remember Kyle from the Grover House episode.
Many years ago.
Yes, and owing to legal complications, we couldn't have him back on until Low Tax was dead. So, but here he is now.
Proud to announce that United States forces have caught and permanently compromised Richard Low Tax Kianka.
All right. What we see in front of us is a boat, and it's underwater.
Not supposed to be there.
It's not supposed to be like that.
Oh shit! I have to load the slide. God damn it!
Oh my god!
I closed the slides tab by accident.
Cool. How the whole thing has like verdigris on it. That's nice though. That's very aesthetic.
Yeah, we have Kyle on because he knows everything there is to know about the Titanic, which is
And do you want to know why there's water all over the place?
Oh, yes.
Somebody left the water running.
Oh my god.
All right, good podcast, guys.
Yeah, actually,
see you next week.
When it sunk, it blocked the big drain at the bottom of the ocean. You know, and that's why we have sea level rise.
Yeah, we can, should, must, and will go down there to blow up the wreck of the Titanic.
Aren't the metal-eating bacteria doing that anyway?
That's the best course of action.
It's good that we have Kyle on because he knows all the stuff about the Titanic. Because I only know one thing about the Titanic, a fun fact, if you will. Which is that when they discovered the wreck of the Titanic and they went inside, the swimming pool was still full.
I only know one thing about the Titanic, and that's that the theme song from the movie Titanic is... Yes.
All right.
Yep, that is the theme song of the 1997 film Titanic.
Yes.
So,
see, we landed the joke that time.
So, but before we talk about Titanic, we have to talk about the goddamn news.
No one's gonna fucking do it.
So there was a concert, and a bunch of people got killed in a crushing accident. Was it Astroworld?
Classic Hillsborough shit.
No, what happened was they injected the crowd with needles from some sort of satanic sacrifice ritual. Because we're really just going to do full-blown satanic panic again.
We're going to do domestic Havana syndrome.
Yeah.
Instead of like concert promoters not giving a shit about your safety, what we're going to do is a guy is secretly injecting people with drugs.
The fentanyl comes in through your skin because that's how fent works.
I
mean, it literally does, I suppose, pierce the dermal layer in a needle. But as somebody who used to regularly use fentanyl to get high, nobody is sharing their fent for free. I can tell you that right now.
And nobody's injecting you with stuff surreptitiously.
No,
like
no one is doing that.
You are noticing that shit if someone tries to inject you with anything. And also,
turns out it hurts.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I mean, no one's gonna fucking like inject you with haloperidol and then secretly lie on top of you for an hour until it starts working.
Oh man, haloperidol, taking me back to my grippy sock days.
Aren't we? Yeah, don't we all have grippy sock days?
Horror of horrors! They injected you with the Pfizer vaccine.
I got my booster shot, but my booster shot was Moderna, so now I'm just like I got the mix and match.
Yeah.
I keep going to concerts and now I'm quintuple vaxxed.
Yeah, I haven't had a cold since 2016, actually.
Everyone's running around trying to blame this concert on like I don't know what, Satanism or something. And really, it was the vaccines all along.
Yeah, so there are gross videos of the Travis Scott still singing while people are being like carried out.
Yeah,
and it's
and
like
his
people climbing on ambulances and shit.
and hopefully the only time I ever have to fucking mention Kylie Jenner on this podcast. Her saying, we didn't know what was happening, as her Snapchat included like an ambulance in the bottom left shot, is some real good shit.
Yeah, they didn't have like any medical provision at the venue at all. Like none of the
medics
medical
apparently who
volunteers.
didn't know CPR.
Yep.
I don't know. Obviously this is a changing story. But this continues our theme of capitalists and the wealthy don't give a shit if you live or die as long as you paid full price for your ticket.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm amazed we haven't seen more concert crush injuries before. But
yeah.
Planning a concert safely takes a shitload of work, and if you don't
And
do
money.
it, you can kill a load of people.
It's expensive, as it turns out.
Yeah, and I mean, honestly, this happened so little that when I first heard about it, I assumed there was some shooting at first. I was like,
Oh
what
yeah,
happened?
yeah, no, just waist height barriers and no crowd control. That's an overcrowding, just a recipe for disaster. Go and listen to the Hillsborough episode. It's very easy to fuck up.
Yep. In other news,
Nudes?
there was a big tire fire here in Philly. It was really
We're
smelly.
all dead, actually.
Yeah.
Nice.
It's a shame that we're all dead here.
Yeah.
I just assumed that Philly just always had tire fires.
We
Yeah,
get
is this like a photo? Why'd you put a photo of City Hall in here?
Looks like those clowns in Congress did it again. What a bunch of clowns.
I mean, I've been to Philly a couple of times, and I just remember stepping off the train and immediately got hit in the face by a bunch of burning tires.
Good. Go Birds.
Bad things happen in Philadelphia.
Mm-hmm. So
It's the motto of the Pennsylvania Secret Service.
Well, they told us that nothing bad was released into the atmosphere.
I don't believe that, because I walked out my kitchen door and it was just haze.
Yeah, I could smell it here in Poplar. Corinne was having trouble breathing. We dropped Corinne's sister and her boyfriend off at the movie theater at 40th and Walnut, and it was literally hard to see, and it stank, man. It was rough.
We love a great smog. Fantastic.
Yeah, I bet you do.
Wait, what?
I bet you, because you're from the land.
Oh, okay. Yeah, sure. Okay.
Yeah, and you love a big, nice dragon.
That's also true.
Yeah. I have known you to enjoy a nice dragon in your day.
I know, I used to smoke that much back in the day, but
I miss smoking. I bought a Marlboro backpack.
Yeah.
Oh, smoking is cool. Don't ever do it.
Yeah, never do it, but smoking does make you cool.
It does make you cool.
And vapes just hit different. They're not the same. They're also bad for you, but they're
not as good.
They're also not as good. We need to invent healthy cigarettes. Where the fuck is science on healthy cigarettes?
Good idea.
Need my T-zone soothed.
Yeah. Scientists, get on it. Maybe you can make a healthy tire fire and then sort of distribute health benefits to the whole community.
Ooh, it's very handy.
Yes. All right, that was the goddamn news.
We put 2 things in there this time. Stop yelling at us.
That's right.
All right, Kyle, tell us about icebergs.
Yeah, we're done. This is your show now.
Yeah, we're just gonna sit back for the next 2 hours.
Kick my feet up.
I'll tell you this. They're bergs, right? And they're made of ice.
Interesting.
Fascinating.
They're also very hard. Essentially, somewhere around 100,000 years ago, there's some snow that fell in Greenland. And, later on, it became a glacier. And, basically, it calved into the ocean. And then it became, the world's most famous iceberg soon thereafter.
This photo fascinates me because it is an identity photo of what they believe to be the actual iceberg, right?
This is the iceberg that killed Trotsky. Don't ask why the CIA has it.
the iceberg that Titanic hit we don't know for sure which one it was. Several were photographed in the vicinity of the sinking afterwards, and the
rounding up the the suspects.
Yeah.
Put them up next to the next to the police lineup thing.
Yeah.
And the one at bottom left there, that one he seems to be like a likely culprit because it was described as looking like the Rock of Gibraltar.
I think they mentioned something about it being like dirty, like it had like maybe paint scraped off on it, but like who knows?
And of course, we know that a lot of ice would have been shaved off the berg. Some of it went into portholes onto the deck. So who knows?
Yeah,
so that's what an iceberg is.
That's what an iceberg is. You can see here how it may have gone from Greenland to where it hit Titanic.
Yeah, likely from I'm not going to pronounce that name, glacier.
Jakobshafen?
Yes, we'll go with that.
Danes are going to get mad at me here because I have too many I have too many consonants, and every Danish word just sounds like
Inga dinga durgan.
Congratulations, you're fluent in Danish.
Yes.
Yeah, now if you like try and eat an apple at the same time, you're fluent in Norwegian.
Duolingo ain't got shit on me.
Oh my God, it's the guy who stands in front of the chains.
What?
Isambard Kingdom Brunel. I'm on the next slide.
Isambard Kingdom. Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
It's for huge fans of gigantic chains, a queer anarchist flag, and some more boats.
The question is, was Brunel, was he a small man or were the chains big?
I think he was a little guy.
I believe
he was a little tiny guy.
Little guy, yeah.
I'm gonna look up Brunel height because I want to see if he was a manlet. Brunel height. Just over 5 feet tall.
Pathetic.
Wow.
It's surprising considering his father, Mark, played football.
You really have gotten a lot of miles out of that joke.
Apparently, this is the reason why he's wearing the top hat in this picture. Is he never took off a top hat, even when it became slightly out of fashion, because he needed like lift in your shoes. He needed the extra height.
I always had the feeling he was just this little dude, and I now that it's confirmed, my life is complete.
A 5 foot tall man creating a railway filled with horse viscera and pushing it pneumatically around Devon. Fantastic.
And of course, starting the race on the Atlantic for speed.
Paddle steamships. That's is that the Great Eastern or the Great Western next to him?
It's the Great Eastern because it's the big one.
Ah, okay.
Big Chungus.
Basically, basically once the Industrial Revolution in the early 19th century sped up, there was a need for like stable shipping lanes. And, especially with the British Empire, you're taking over the whole world. You got to get things to and fro fast, right?
Yeah, of course.
So at the same time, international waters were established, and, suddenly you could just start any kind of like, line to just carry passengers to and fro. So, at the same time, by 1807, the steam engines, were proved to be a viable way of propelling commercial vessels across the ocean. So, the Black Ball Line was the first in establishing one of these liner services.
Don't be gross.
It's got a cool flag. It's got a cool little pennant there. I like that a lot.
We're a respectable podcast for respectable people.
Which, I guess aids recognition.
I mean, it would be very funny if that were the line behind Titanic. I'll say that. White Star Line. What is that?
Yeah.
It is fun looking at some of these old shipping line pennants because they get more and more elaborate, but they're still crammed into that form factor of like the two-tailed pennant. So like some of them, like Hapag or whatever, they're just like cramming tiny text on there.
In 1837, the SS Sirius, it had made one of the first successful steamship voyages between Liverpool and New York. Apparently, it ran out of fuel, and the crew had to burn furnishings to keep it going.
Oh, dear.
Nice.
Oops.
Just stokers throwing chairs into a fire. Fantastic.
Oh, yeah.
That's weight savings, baby.
Yeah, and apparently it was even made possible by the use of technology, something called a condenser, so that they could just cycle fresh water through the boilers without having to clean the salt out of the boilers every now and then. Of course, the record that ship set didn't last long because literally the next day it was beaten by our friend Isambard Kingdom Brunel's SS Great Western.
Yeah, manlet victory.
Yes.
And what we have here on the bottom right is the thing that makes this all into a competition: a blue ribbon that doesn't look like a blue ribbon.
I was about to say it seems to be a trophy of some kind.
It was more like the blue riband.
Yeah, but that's only because they spelled things wrong in the past on purpose as a joke.
Yeah, that's true. And it was basically with the Great Western's little record breaker that this fight for speed on the Atlantic began, and I guess in a way size as well. So, by the mid 19th century, the liners began using iron for their steel hulls, and then steel hulls themselves, because they were getting bigger, getting faster. You didn't want them falling apart, right? Wood just wasn't good enough. And so by 1858, the Great Eastern was built by Brunel, largest ship in the world for 43 years. Yep, and by the 1860s, Cunard and the White Star Line had gotten quite big, and they were competing, for the bigger and faster ships. And from 1880 on, ships just continued to grow in size and luxury.
Now, wasn't the Great Eastern built on the flawed premise that there was no coal in Australia and they have to make the round trip without refueling?
I don't know, but that sounds true.
That is a hell of a thing to just randomly extract from your brain.
Yeah, it's like there's no coal in Australia. It turns out there is a lot of coal in Australia, and it's in a place called Newcastle, ironically.
Sort of nominative undeterminism.
Right? I didn't know the blue riband was actually a physical thing. Where is it now? That's what I want to know.
That's a great question, actually.
I did not
all
research
I can find
that.
is unofficial. Blue ribboned trophy. I'm gonna find out.
If I had to guess, it was never really this super official big thing per se. Although, fun fact, the last ever holder of the blue riband is the SS United States, currently docked in Philly.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, so it's probably still in Philadelphia.
Yeah, exactly. It's such floating around somewhere. Maybe it's in it's in a closet on the ship.
Melted down for scrap.
All right, I've gone to
Buried
the next
under
slide.
the IKEA.
So, here we got, the ever increasing size of ships. The rivalry between the British and German lines at this point was also picking up because the Germans, these people were like, you know what, we're just going to build bigger. And so, yeah. So the Nord, I'm not going to say that. The Lloyd and the Hamburger America line.
Delicious.
I found
Hamburger
it.
America line.
The blue ribbon trophy is in Copenhagen right now.
Oh, wow.
Oh.
It's in the main office of Scandlines Ferries.
It doesn't belong there.
No,
it should be in Philly.
We need a national treasure style heist by the Pennsylvania Secret Service.
That's because I believe because one of their ferries was manufactured in Canada, and it was one of those high speed ferries, and it came over very quickly. Now the thing is, I thought the blue ribbon you had to go both ways fast and not just one way.
No,
But,
it's one way. Here it is. Yeah, the current holder is Fjord Cat, which is a catamaran.
Oh, well.
So they get the trophy. So what we need to do is steal that trophy back.
Yeah, I was about to say. Well, if we got the SS United States up to a good clip, we could probably do it. Put a real big motor in there.
Oh, yeah.
So, the German lines are competing heavily with the British lines, as they would. And the Germans were building these bigger and better ships, starting with the Kaiser Wilhelm the Grosse or something like that. The Kaiser won the blue ribbon for speed in 1897, followed by the Kaiser class of ships being built. In fact, even in 1912, while Titanic was setting sail, the Germans already had a ship called the SS Imperator at 906 feet and 52,000 tons, which is bigger than Titanic. on it being built at the time. So Titanic wouldn't have lasted long as the biggest ship.
Sort of misremembered as this like unprecedented act of hubris, but rather this like long chain of continual improvement.
Yeah. I mean, Titanic wasn't even unique. I mean, it was literally there's a helicopter flying overhead. But it was literally a carbon copy of its sister ship, the Olympic. So, even that wasn't that unique. It was just one in a chain of ships, everyone trying to outdo each other. And, that's how you got the Cunard. They came in and they built the Lusitania and the Mauretania in response to the Kaiser class. The Mauretania won the blue ribbon, and apparently it kept that for 20 years. So then, the White Star Line had to build a new set of ships to keep up because, you have to. So this is where the story of the Olympic class liners really starts. In 1907, it was decided by White Star President J. Bruce Ismay and Harland and Wolff shipyard director William Peary to build a new set of 3 ships.
I enjoy Ismay's moustaches. I'll say that much for him.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Ismay had quite a mustache. So, these ships would eventually be known as Olympic, Titanic, and Britannic. Olympic was laid down first on December 16th, 1908. Titanic followed on March 31st, 1909.
And built in Belfast, so Glasgow is off the hook. Clyde Shipbuilding remains untarnished.
Mm-hmm. And Britannic came much later. It was laid down in November 30th, 1911, but it never got completed because of World War I. And it got converted to a hospital ship, and then it got blowed up near the island of Kea in Greece, and that's a whole story on its own. It involves people getting chopped up in propellers, so that could be a whole episode on its own.
Fun.
Yeah, we'll get you back
on.
So yeah, all 3 ships were built mainly from the same design. It was like, take this, build it. It's mostly the same, but they would improve over time as they learned from the different disasters and the voyages and stuff.
It's meant to be fast, but also luxurious, right? So like it has a lot of amenities on it. It has like a squash court and a smoking room and shit.
Oh yeah. The thing about White Star though is they had this weird thing where they wanted the ships to be fast, I think, but they didn't have too much of a concern about it. It was Cunard that was really into the speed. White Star was more about luxury, I think.
It's the kind of thing you go on if you're a billionaire and you want to like get there in a reasonable time scale, but also you want to be able to smoke your cigars and like look at your gold pocket watch.
Yeah, sure. Or, it's of course back then the big thing at the time was the immigrant flow. So ships were built basically just for that, and it was a bonus that rich people would be able to travel, and maybe some middle class people in second class.
Well, we have to talk about classes, both in the sense of a class system in society, but also in terms of tickets, right? Because you have a very rigid class distinction in 1912's Britain still of upper class, emerging middle class, and then working class.
And then steerage.
Yeah, exactly.
And of course we'll be getting to that. But first, we have to go over the design and designers, more or less. So,
Wrong slide. Okay, am I still here? Okay.
Yeah. So, the ship Titanic would end up being 882 and a half feet long, more or less. Well, 9 inches, actually. 92 feet wide and a half. The design was relatively modern for the time, and, it was a very sleek, clean, sort of exterior lines. It wasn't covered in vents and all that stuff. It had vents, but, it was primarily designed by Alexander Carlisle, William Peary, and Thomas Andrews of Harland and Wolff, although Andrews was more prominent later, whereas Carlisle would retire some way through the building process.
Yeah, finishing off your career with your magnum opus and assuming nothing bad is ever going to happen.
And, it's Carlisle was apparently very much for more lifeboats, but I'll get to that. The ship, of course, had watertight compartments, 16 divided by 15 bulkheads, the highest ones ending at D deck, and most of them ending at like E deck.
You got a little diagram of that.
And it wasn't unique. ships at the time generally had watertight compartments, so did the Cunard liners and all that. It was standard technology by then. Of course, they had to be divided by watertight doors. Although on Titanic,
next slide.
yeah, that's good. On Titanic, though, not all the watertight doors were automatically controlled from the bridge. If you press the switch on there, it would only close the lowest doors between the boiler rooms and engine rooms.
So for everything else, it either has to close when it detects water or when a guy comes and cranks a big hand crank.
You're actually not wrong. Well, the ones lower down had floats that could drop them automatically if it started flooding, but the ones up top, fully manual. They had to stick this weird tool into a hole and turn it, and it was a whole thing.
Great, perfect. And we have some like permissible flooding conditions in the top right here, which I like.
Yeah, Titanic was technically rated for any 2 compartments to be flooded, but she could also stay afloat with all 4 of her forward ones or her aft compartments, or flooding in 4 compartments from the reciprocating engine room to boiler room 3, and probably some other scenarios too. So she was pretty reliable, in theory.
Would you say unsinkable?
Yeah, actually, at least that's what they said back then. So yeah,
and one would say famously unsinkable.
The hull, of course, built from. Next slide.
I'm going to say it was not unsinkable on account of its sunk.
Yes.
Nothing.
So, oh wait, there's a conspiracy theory about that. I didn't even put that in my notes.
I've also seen the intentionally sank for the insurance money conspiracy theory.
No, the Titanic never sank. It's parked next to MH370.
Yeah,
and all of the 9/11 planes.
And JFK is on it.
And he's going to become president again and campaign for Trump.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
But that's not in the Constitution. It's zombie JFK. But why am I lying? The Constitution doesn't matter. Who cares?
Yeah.
Nothing matters.
So we got a hull here.
Yeah, we do have a hull or a hole, built from just
hull.
Just a bunch of ribs and frames and the hull plating riveted on and all kinds of stuff. You see, it's just a bunch of stuff, right?
Rivets instead of welds is interesting.
Yeah, I mean, welding was coming into it. It wasn't there yet. Riveting was the preferred method of putting ships together. Welding existed, of course, and I think they used it on a few areas, very, very limited, but it was mainly riveting.
Riveting is always funny to me because the way in which you did it in these shipyards was literally a guy throwing a red hot rivet at you so you could catch it and fucking rivet it into the thing with a gun.
Hell yeah.
It's one of the most sort of unnecessarily dangerous things you can do.
Yeah.
Do we know if sorry, you mentioned that welding wasn't used, was it used on Titanic, or are you talking about it was just used sort of experimentally on other ships?
I think it was used on Titanic, but I'm not sure where.
Okay. No, I gotcha. I just wasn't sure.
But the main thing with riveting are these hull plates, right?
Yeah.
The red bits on the outside, if you like.
Yeah, the meaning of those is the plates had this alternating pattern of in and out, and they overlapped a bit in rows and all that. And basically, it was divided between the hull and the superstructure. At the bottom right, the superstructure is the thing in blue. The hull is green. Superstructure was built on top. It wasn't part of the ship structure proper, which meant that the superstructure didn't add any strength to the ship. And that's where they had on the superstructure these expansion joints, so the ship could twist in the sea and the structure wouldn't fall apart. People have like to claim that the expansion joints led to the Titanic breaking apart, but that's impossible. They just didn't do anything for the structure.
Much to consider, yeah.
Yes.
And Titanic also had a double bottom as well as Olympic, blah, blah, blah. It was also a common thing at the time. The main concern was grounding. So they never thought, what if we ran into something on the side? So they just didn't bother to extend it up the side.
Okay.
turned out that actually that was the type of accident that was going to happen.
Cursed by
Incredibly.
its own hubris.
Yes.
Oh my God! I just realized I put on my notes they were not load-bearing expansion joints.
Thank you, Kyle.
Yeah.
Of course, the ship had a dummy funnel. All famously, that's what people like to say. The fun fact: Titanic had a dummy funnel. It's true in that it wasn't used to vent the boiler rooms, but it was used to vent the waste gases from the galleys and some other stuff,
Ooh.
like the first class smokeroom fireplace.
Tasty.
Still wasn't.
Get JJ Astor's cigarette smoke mixed with your fucking lamb or whatever. Yeah, great, perfect.
The ship had 29 Scotch boilers across 6 boiler rooms, double-ended, 5 single-ended ones. And the boiler room 1 was furthest aft that had the single-ended boilers. It was next to the engine room. 6 was furthest forward and had 4 boilers.
Yeah. So you need like an army of stokers to physically take coal out of the bunkers and shovel it into these motherfuckers.
Yep. They had between the boiler rooms and above them were these huge coal bunkers with literally just thousands of tons of coal. And it was the job of trimmers to take the coal out and bring it to the firemen so they could shove it into the boilers.
Did they not have automatic stokers?
No.
Wow. You'd think that, a big stationary boiler like that, it'd be relatively easy to do, but what do I know?
Why do that when you can have the Irish do it?
Exactly.
Yeah, cheaper to hire an Irishman or 50 Irishmen.
Yeah. And, the ship also had 4 dynamos. These generated a ton of electricity. There was an emergency set on the higher decks. It was distributed through a whole bunch of electricity lines through breakers and fuses and all that.
You know what's bad? You know what's annoying? I was looking for automatic stokers. First 20 results on Google are all male sex toys. All of them. It's just like masturbatory aid, and I'm like, no, coal stoker.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
Wow.
So, speaking of things that stroked, Titanic had 2 triple expansion reciprocating
Beautiful
steam engines.
Beautiful, thank you.
These engines were capable of 30,000 horsepower. That's a lot of stroke.
Yes.
Several stories tall. They were just massive, massive pieces of machinery. And, they drove 2 outer wing propellers, which are 23 feet in diameter, via 2 very long shafts. Which also ran through thrust blocks. That's what they were called.
Mood.
I'm not being dirty.
Roz, the first mechanical stoker wasn't invented until 1905. But the Pennsylvania Railroad was the first to use it.
Huh.
Yes.
So
Like when they were on the bleeding edge of technology.
So they were brand new. Yeah, that's probably, I guess, the same thing with the welds.
So what do you use all of this electricity for? Obviously lights, but there's not a lot of sort of conveniences at this time that you would use electricity for, right?
You'd be surprised. Titanic had, first of all, a bunch of lights, but all kinds of motorized things, a bunch of fans for ventilation. And in the kitchens, you'd be shocked how much stuff they had in the kitchens, like in terms of gizmos to help the cooks. And, they had egg boilers and electric griddles and electric, salamanders and all kinds of electric gizmos and steam ovens and all just a crazy amount of stuff that they could use. It was super modern for the time.
Bizarre old-timey microwave.
Yeah, it just kills the guy who uses it every time. You just dump his body overboard.
Yeah, get another Irish.
In addition
to
to
a big bunker full of Irish guys along with the coal bunker, just pull one out whenever you need one.
I mean, it's true. They
This is my
fueled the ship
closet
on
of Patty
Irishmen.
O'Reilly's.
Yeah.
So Titanic also had a big 16,000 horsepower steam turbine. It's this big turbine, of course. It drove steam through a bunch of fine blades, and it turned a center propeller, which is about 17 feet in diameter. That ran from steam that had already come through the main engines. So if the main engines weren't going, the center propeller couldn't go. And then that center propeller could only go forward. And fun fact, it's thought that Titanic's center propeller had only 3 blades. And we in the Titanic community constantly debate about it.
Oh,
So no one went down and checked.
really like bad faith debating too. Like really, it gets personal, gets ugly.
Oh, it does. Everything in that happens often in the Titanic community.
You
We're nuts.
fucking dweebs.
Exactly. We're the worst. We're awful.
I actually think it had 5 blades.
No one can prove me wrong.
16 blades.
Are we
It's
seriously
actually-
rated clean on Apple Podcasts? Apparently, yes, we are.
Oh.
We'll
And of
see if that
course,
sticks around after the thrust blocks.
Yes.
oh yeah.
Yeah, way to go,
Um,
Kyle.
Of course, the ship also had a macaroni system. No, Marconi system.
Macaroni system.
Ah, famous.
Yeah, of
Yeah,
course.
you pick up the handset and a bunch of pasta gets squeezed out.
It's
Oh, yeah.
it's made out of it's made out of potatoes, though.
Yeah.
That's all we know down here.
That's how they powered it. So it was around 1894, 1890. Why does my notes say 1995?
Yeah.
So it was during the Clinton administration that
Yeah.
they installed a Marconi system
Yeah.
on the Titanic. They went down there, wired it in.
Well, they couldn't install it. They had to install it before the movie came out, of course.
Yeah.
That's
Of
true. That's
course.
why it was 95. So, of course, Italian inventor, electrical engineer, and future fascist Guglielmo Marconi, of course, invented the first practical radio transmitters and receivers. And so by Titanic's time, the Marconi company was a huge thing, and it had a Marconi wireless setup on board.
They wholly owned that too, didn't they? Like it was a Marconi TM office operated by Marconi employees.
Yes.
And Marconi owns all the equipment and like leases it to you. It's a good business model if you can corner the market that quickly.
Yeah, and the wireless operators on Titanic were not like actual crew; they were Marconi company employees.
Which has led to some intriguing allegations of like sort of like different loyalties there. It's interesting.
Of course, Titanic's Marconi system. It had a huge antenna wired between the 2 masts that were on either end of the ship. And there were keys and controls and stuff, and in an office by the bridge, and there was also a silent room which housed the dangerous equipment. The stuff that you don't want to touch when it's going.
Oh, cool!
Oh boy.
I love a silent room. And as well as just doing shipping traffic, they also did passenger traffic, right? They did like send and receive telegrams for passengers.
Yeah. They actually had between the Marconi office and the first class enquiry office, there were these pneumatic tubes like you have at the bank, so they could just go, just send like Marconigrams and stuff through there.
That's like wild that you wouldn't have any kind of separation. Like your sort of your ship critical traffic is also just mixed in with again John Jacob Astor writing home for more cigarettes.
Yeah,
Speedboat comes up alongside. So speedboat, a literal cigarette boat, if you will.
and people at the time, people saw it as a bit of a novelty at the time too. So it was like, "Ooh, I'm gonna send a message home to my family and all this," or "I'm gonna send ahead for a train to be, slated for my arrival."
So
That
the
kind of
same
thing.
novelty of phones on airplanes.
Yeah, except you get a little like Marconigram that you can keep at the other end.
Oh, I just rip the phone off the thing usually.
That's a souvenir, yeah.
What? It's coming with me, baby.
I've been wanting to say this for a long time. Next slide, please.
Oh boy.
Nice.
So, Titanic, had about
Glory
8
hole.
Oh, I just knew you were going to spot that instantly. So, fun story. The glory holes were basically the crew dormitories, and they called them that because it was an ironic thing, because they were
No, it wasn't.
generally
No, it
very
wasn't.
bad places on ships, like just not
You
good
called them that
conditions at
because
all.
you could put your penis through a hole in the
Yes.
bulkheads.
Yes.
And
That's not watertight.
It is now.
see that's the
Only-
fucking real expansion joint that killed the Titanic.
Some dude just sticking his dogger in a
That's what would have plugged the holes if all the Irish had just stuck their dicks in the holes.
That's true.
Yep.
Then
That's
the ship would
absolutely
not
true.
have sunk.
hmm
So, yeah, Titanic had 8-letter decks and 3 lower decks, for the engines and stuff. You had the boat deck. It had different facilities on it, mainly first class passengers and crew. And that's, of course, where the lifeboats are stored. And that was at the top of the ship. Then you had A through F decks. Of course, you see a ship's plan at left. And those decks were passenger and crew accommodations. First class was mostly up top. Third class is mostly lower down, fore and aft. Second was more aft. And you had the G and Orlop decks, mostly third class and crew spaces. And you had the perishable provisions, the refrigerated rooms and aft. And then you had the post office and mail room and blah blah blah. The refrigerated rooms are pretty cool. They were run by 2 refrigerating engines, and they connected to these rooms via just a load of brine pipes running all over the place, and it kept the rooms nice and cool. It's
pipe full of brine.
Yeah. The brine carries the heat away.
Okay.
Enjoying the disparity between these sort of amenities here.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Of course, on the map that I have there, it's color coded. The green is first class, yellow is second, red is third, purple is like the engineering areas, and blue is the rest of the crew areas.
So they keep like third class completely walled off from everyone else, right?
Yes and no. I'll be getting to that later.
Check out this decor, though.
Yeah.
There's like pounds and like tons of like excess fucking decoration on here.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah. Of course, it looks heavier than it was. It's a common misconception that the ship was like this is just so luxurious that it was just full of marble and stuff.
Cursed by its own hubris.
Yeah, this like floating sort of grand piano thing.
Affront to God.
Yeah.
Do you want to know what
why
the
you sank it.
fanciest? Do you want to know what the fanciest flooring on board was?
Yes, please.
Yes, please.
Linoleum.
Oh well.
Brand new, state of the art. Yeah.
Probably had asbestos in it too.
Wipes clean.
Probably.
I mean, what else do you want?
Yeah.
Very handy stuff. I mean, that linoleum was tiled everywhere, including the famous grand staircase and a whole bunch of other places. They just used it as much as they could. And of course, the exterior decks, which are somewhat relevant to the events of the sinking. You had the well decks. They were fore and aft. They were the lowest exterior decks. You had the forecastle. That was the furthest deck forward. The pointy bit. You had the poop deck, which has nothing to do with poop.
Yes,
that was aft.
The folks saw the bit where Whitney Houston and Kevin Costner do the like arms out thing in the movie Titanic.
Although in reality, they wouldn't have been allowed in that spot. There was a breakwater on the forecastle with a sign that said passengers weren't allowed forward of that.
You just climb over it. It's fine.
Yeah.
What are they going to do? Push you
care.
off the boat?
Yeah, Kevin Costner's literally a criminal in that movie. It's fine.
Yeah, who cares? And on the poop deck, of course, there was a docking bridge that had an extra helm and some telegraphs, in case to use while they were docking. Then you had B and A deck. They were the exterior, like the passenger promenades mostly. A deck was a whole wraparound promenade, which also meant to double as like a place to load the lifeboats from, but that didn't quite work out on Titanic, and we'll get to that.
Promenades are cool. Back when there was so little going on that going for a walk was like an activity in itself, like a hobby.
These people just loved going to the promenade, and on there they also had hundreds of deck chairs, and all of them are numbered, and you could just rent one out, and it was nice, apparently.
Yeah, and you could rearrange them.
Yes.
Yeah. Although technically you couldn't, because
Damn you, Kyle.
Every chair had an assigned spot. There were number boards up on the ceiling showing where they should go. And I'm sure there was no 13th chair. In fact, they avoided the number 13 on board in a lot of places except for Lifeboat 13. And that itself is also a story.
I'm just I know that this is White Star and not Hamburg Line, but I'm just imagining some German guy up front. There's some German guy up front yelling at people who are trying to rearrange the chairs. Nine, moving das chair.
You try and rearrange the chairs on the Titanic, and you find there's already a German flag towel on one of them, and you're just like, God.
He paid to rent
look,
chair 9. It's his chair, Roz.
That did I'm sure that did happen in the Nazi Titanic. So you never know.
Oh yeah, absolutely. We'll get to the Nazi Titanic. I insisted on putting in the Nazi Titanic.
Oh yeah, I got that in here.
The Zeppelin wasn't good enough.
And of course, the boat deck again, lifeboats. Cool. The bridge was at the forward end of it. So the classes, first, second, third, plus crew. The first class, there's definitely the purview of like the upper crust and the millionaires and those who could afford a ticket. But it wasn't just millionaires and billionaires. I mean, there were a lot of cheaper rooms that you could get. And basically, in the movie, how Molly Brown and all, every cabin you see in the movie is super fancy, right? In reality, most of the cabins in first class were very simple. The 4 photos in kind of the middle top, you see some different cabins. The 2 on the right is what most of the cabins looked like. Plain paneling, standard furnishings, exposed ceiling beams, and all kinds of stuff like that.
They spent all that money on the piano.
Yeah. It was very standard stuff, and I'm sure those were a lot cheaper. And if you had the money, you could, you wouldn't have to be rich. You could probably travel in first, as a treat. Second class, it was effectively the middle class. It was apparently very common for people who could afford to travel first to go in second because, 1, they wanted to save money, and 2, they preferred the laid back atmosphere of second class. It was a little less stuffy,
You don't have to like dress as much for dinner, sort of thing.
I have to run into a millionaire and have to talk to him. Oh God.
Oh yeah, and I think even today it's still a common thing on ships, cruise ships. But at dinner you had to go to assigned tables, and they pair you with people. And
sort of first class is sort of white tie, second class is black tie, third class, as we know from the Kevin Costner movie, is like a bunch of filthy Irish people dancing reels with each other.
Yes. It's where we belong, Alice.
And third class, of course, it was primarily for the immigrants and the poor people. And again, the immigrant trade back then was just a massive, massive moneymaker for them. So they just stuffed them in where they could. And there were strict measures in place to prevent contact between them and the upper classes, but primarily due to concerns about diseases, because you don't want everyone catching COVID.
Yeah, you don't want Mr. Astor to get like fucking Serbian fever.
Newsflash: you can't catch alcoholism.
Has sudden craving for potatoes. I've caught the Irish.
Remember always to wear a mask when you're in an enclosed space with Irish people.
Except that the mask is a ski mask, and do you guys want to go cause some problems?
And the thing about
Kyle
Titanic is that,
trying to remain on topic.
and it's a comment. The thing about Titanic, they had this weird. I've often heard people say, did you know that black people were banned from Titanic? That wasn't true. I mean, prejudices of the time notwithstanding, they were allowed on the ship. There was a black man named Joseph LaRoche, who was a second-class passenger. He was a Haitian traveling back to Haiti with his white French wife and their 2 children. There was also a Japanese man in second class and several Chinese men aboard, 6 of whom survived sinking, and they were in third class.
You think just based on the nature of the itinerary, that most of the people who'd be getting on in Europe would be, Europeans.
Yeah.
But of course, there were still, racism was a thing still. As I understand it, the LaRoche, the black passenger, he generally stayed in his cabin for the most part.
Sucks.
Yep.
Sadly, he ended up dying in the sinking. His wife and children survived, though. But it was because he was a man, and these people they stood back on the decks while their wives and children and all that went off lifeboats. It's just the saddest thing. Also, apparently, LaRoche was related to one of the presidents of Haiti, so that was a thing. So yeah. Anyway, yeah. But despite the crew did have this weird obsession with Italians. They hated Italians.
Okay.
Okay.
Sure.
And you're
Go
actually
up.
gonna, if we even get there with all the with how much we have to go through, that did come up later in the sinking.
When did that come up? Just like on
You would
past
be-
Well,
the ship
like
splitting in two, and
the
they're like,
second officer
Giuseppe,
catches a guy.
Giuseppe Bordel,
Yeah.
no, stay on the boat.
The second officer catches a guy making hand gestures and shoots him to discourage the others. Yeah.
You'd be surprised. Like, for example, Titanic had this restaurant aboard. It was called the a la carte restaurant. Very fancy. It was not a standard dining saloon. It was separate from your ticket price. You had to pay per meal.
Walking into the a la carte restaurant, ordering spaghetti carbonara and getting thrown
And being
overboard.
brutally murdered, right?
It was managed separately from like the White Star Line. Essentially, it was an independent business on Titanic. It had its own staff, its own manager. His name was Gotti. The restaurant had 69 employees.
Nice.
Three
good,
of them survived.
Damn, that's
Jeez.
less nice.
And apparently a lot of them were Italians, and that also probably contributed a bit to the fact that so few survived. So yeah, the ship had various amenities. You had your squash courts, one squash court. You had a Turkish bath. Don't ask what a Turkish bath is. I don't even know. I think
it's the place where, like, if you're a millionaire, you go to get jerked off.
Yeah.
Yep.
yeah, you know what? We'll go with that. They also had this thing called an electric bath. It was like it looked like a tanning bed, and there were bright lights attached to it, but I don't know what the hell it did.
Suicide booth.
Possibly. It had a swimming pool or a plunge bath, if you will. Apparently, it may have been heated. I think there were like steam pipes or something for that. And they
of
had
course,
like
modern cruise liners knock this out of the water, both in terms of amenities and also size, right? Like we went over stuff that's on modern cruise ships, and I think the Estonia episode.
Oh
And
yeah.
we
Costa
both
Concordia.
decided
Where we get
Costa
increasingly
Concordia,
mad.
yeah,
Yeah,
where
we
it
just
was
started
a
screaming
man's
at you.
hubris
Yeah.
against God. Yes.
The Titanic did not have a
That's-
climbing wall, I assume.
No.
no
They didn't have
climbing.
Well, I
water
mean, it did by
slides.
the end.
It
but
did. It did have
Involuntary
ladders.
climbing wall.
A roller coaster. One-way roller coaster.
Ooh,
Is it just me, or is this plunge pool getting bigger?
maybe. The decor on the ship, was standard at the time. Like I said, it wasn't really that fancy. They just used a shitload of linoleum, and a lot of standard. Like most of the corridors on the ship, and most of the rooms were just this same kind of plain white paneling. It was just ridiculous. White Star Line was actually they were pretty cheap when it came to like saving money on like interior decor. If they didn't have to like go out of their way to decorate this or that space outside of a public room, they wouldn't bother with it.
Weight savings. Titanic Superleggera.
Without standardization of signage, you have to imagine a maze of identical whitewashed corridors. Pretty easy to get lost in.
Yeah, that's going to come up later with third class, unfortunately. So, next slide, please.
We're talking about davits.
Yes. So the lifeboat capacity on the final ship was 20 lifeboats with a capacity of 1,178. They had different kinds of boats. There were 16 30-footers. They could hold 65 each. Two of the boats are 25-foot emergency cutters. They had a capacity of 40. The cutters were kept hung overboard at all times in case a guy fell overboard or something like that. Four of the boats were these 25.5-foot collapsible Engelhard collapsibles. It was this weird boat, which was like a pontoon and a low structure, and then you could raise canvas sides. It was very weird. I don't even know why they had it, but those could hold a total of 188 together. And this is where we get into one of the biggest things about Titanic, the lifeboat regulations. So this is good. This is going to be a big one. So the Merchant Shipping Act of 1894 called for ships over 10,000 tons to have 16 lifeboats at minimum. Naturally, of course, ships kept growing. And, White Star Line's Oceanic of 1899 was 17,000 tons. Lusitania and Mauretania in 1907 were triple that minimum tonnage. And Olympic and Titanic, by the time they came along, were 4.5 times the 10,000 tons. So
No, but the regulation didn't keep pace at all, so it was still 20.
Did the 16 lifeboats, was it specified how many passengers the lifeboats had to be able to carry?
I don't think so. I think it was just based on tonnage.
Oh, okay, that's helpful.
Some at the Board of Trade did feel that the regulations needed to be updated. By 1909, Alexander Carlisle, the Titanic's chief designer, then had already expected that the regulations might be updated. They were thinking at the time, these ships are so big, they're going to update these regulations any day now. So Carlisle took it upon himself to design a new type of davit and lifeboat arrangement. He submitted the designs to White Star, who approved it, and then they were sent to the Wallen Quadrant Davit Company. I think they were Swedish or something. Carlisle's idea was to have davits that could each hold 4 lifeboats, with the possibility of holding 64 total lifeboats on the ship. And Carlisle, he was definitely for the having more boats, and but the plan, the plan was to follow through with the regulations, whatever they called for. So, if they called for 32 boats, they'd put 32. If it called for basically the minimum, whatever they could do. So by October 1909, there was a meeting between Carlisle and Harland and Wolff chairman William Peary, J. Bruce Ismay, and his right-hand man, Harold Sanderson. Carlisle had suggested that due to the uncertainty over the future of the law, they might be prepared to carry a large number of lifeboats, by using these new davits. Ismay agreed, but they never discussed whether they would actually have more lifeboats, just that they would have davits that would hold more lifeboats.
Yeah, it's future-proof in case they change the regulations, but nobody did.
Right.
Yeah.
Was there like a theory of evacuating the ship at all? Was like, the idea being that the shipping lanes are so crowded, another boat's going to come along and we can,
That's exactly the thought they had at the time. Basically, the ship itself was seen as a lifeboat, and the lifeboats were seen as ferries to get people to another ship.
And you don't have any kind of like evacuation drill either, right? Like you don't make passengers practice to get to the lifeboats or have them know where the lifeboats are necessarily.
On Titanic at the time, I'm not sure. I don't think so. The crew had to do drills to the muster drills. Like the crew were assigned in different parts in different areas, different departments. There were lists showing what crew were assigned to what lifeboats, but I don't know quite what it was with the passengers. Although I think there were some rudimentary evacuation procedures that would have been on papers in their rooms.
They had life vests too, right? Like
yeah. They had life belts for everyone aboard. I forgot how many though. They were, every cabin had life belts. They were all over the place.
The lifeboats were cork at this point, I believe.
Yeah, and they were also dangerous. Apparently, some people when they jumped into the water, the life belt shot up when they hit the water, and it like broke their necks. Basically,
fuck that.
That's gone poorly.
Just kill me on the boat, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were just not good.
Really, all this show is an elaborate exercise in how would you like to die the least.
The actual number of boats, of course, was left to the Board of Trade. Despite the regulations, Carlisle still felt that the ships should have 32 boats, even if they didn't update the regulations. So 3 per davit set. He even made plans showing how this layout would look. After Welland submitted the davit plans to the Board of Trade for approval, it was noted that Olympic and Titanic were apparently going to be fitted with 32 lifeboats. But the BOT had still not decided on updating the regulations. And although Harland and Wolff had leeway in design decisions, they felt that the number of boats was up to the White Star Line, so they just didn't do anything about it.
Also,
So-
launching the boats, like because of these new davits, they never really trained the crew on them, as I understand it.
They trained some of the crew. There was a drill on the day they left Southampton for the Board of Trade to show that the lifeboats worked and everything. But I think it is safe to say that, like, by the time Titanic sank, the crew they weren't overly familiar with how the lifeboat systems worked, and that led to issues. So, you have to ask yourself, why did the White Star Line drag their feet on the matter? Carlisle suggested that the White Star basically they were considering their other fleets and their other steamers, as he put it. In other words, if White Star Line made changes to Olympic and Titanic, they'd have to go back and change their other ships and add more lifeboats to those. And, it's just expensive, and they probably didn't want to do it because, of course, they were very conservative with their money.
Yeah. Spoils your nice view from the boat deck. Ruins the beautiful lines of the ship.
That actually, I don't think that's true. It's a common myth that they basically just didn't have lifeboats because of they wanted more space on the deck. But as far as I know, it was mainly complacency and this weird obsession with just waiting on the Board of Trade to tell them what to do.
Big government overreach right there.
I am shocked and appalled.
Carlisle, he was still involved in the lifeboat debate even after he retired. He joined the committee to advise the Board of Trade on lifeboat regulations. There was a meeting with the committee that was held in May 1911. The lifeboat plans were discussed, and Carlisle said outright at the meeting that he didn't think there were enough lifeboats aboard Olympic and Titanic. But despite that, the committee decided not to recommend changing lifeboat regulations and submitted their final report in July 1911.
Oh, that's awesome. That's so cool.
Wow.
Carlisle signed off on the report. Later, he would say he regretted it, saying he did not know why he signed off on it when he didn't agree with it. Other than that, he said he was soft that day when he normally wouldn't be.
Remember when the boat designers were hard?
If you don't have priapism by the time this boat launches, you're fired.
So of course, the BOT, following the recommendations, just stayed with the current regulations.
20 boats.
Yep, 20 boats. And so, there's also, more deck space and a cover up. So, again, the popular claim, deck space. I don't think that's true. The lifeboats were thought of as ferries, not life-saving devices in themselves. But apparently there was one person who was extremely concerned about the lack of boats. Captain Maurice Clark. He was in charge of basically overseeing Titanic's safety and, signing off on it before she left port. Apparently in documents that were unsealed after, about a century, it's found that Clark wrote his concerns basically in private documents. He said that he wanted 50% more lifeboats on the ship, but was ignored by White Star.
This is another myth, right? Is that everybody thought, oh, this was unsinkable, rather than people at the time in the field were like, this is dangerous. You know?
I mean, obviously, Titanic's very chief designer wanted more boats, and there were other people who thought, maybe it's a good idea if we had more boats, just in case. And of course, some people wouldn't have wanted to push back, and Clark was one of them. He wrote that to deviate would leave me without support. I might be shifted as suggested to me by others if I enforced my views as to efficiency.
All right, we got to talk about construction.
Yeah.
Oh, we're getting to that. The unsinkable ship.
Seen here, covered in girders.
Yes.
Oh yeah. It's the ships were said to be practically unsinkable, quote unquote. The White Star Line put out a pamphlet in 1910 describing the new class of ships as unsinkable. There was another publication in 1911 that said, as far as it is possible to do, these two wonderful vessels are designed to be unsinkable. When Sylvia Caldwell, the Caldwell family on Titanic, had asked the deckhand. Yeah. Your descendants, Alice.
Yeah.
Apparently, they asked a nearby deckhand supposedly if the ship was really unsinkable, and he answered, "Yes, lady, God himself could not sink the ship."
Hubris.
Oh, that's some hubris right there. I wouldn't-
That's your hubris. It's that guy's fault.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's telling that you have to reassure people, because these days, right, if you put an ad for a cruise ship, practically unsinkable, it would make people more nervous that you felt that you had to say it.
You would think that. Well, I mean, yes, obviously, in light of popular culture. But the funny thing is, back in those days, it was a little different. So, for one thing, the media and the people ran with the unsinkable idea. Practically unsinkable under certain circumstances became God himself couldn't sink the ship. And so, because, it was not that it was supposed to be absolutely unsinkable, just that it was unsinkable for the most part, sometimes, depending on what happened.
You have this sort of implicit suggestion that the other ship you might take is, in fact, sinkable.
Yeah. And, most assumed scenarios with limited damage, run head on into something, you have a small hole. Nobody thought, what would happen if you just ground an iceberg across the side,
Yeah, very, very difficult to sink, though. I think we can say that.
Yeah.
You have to really screw up to sink the ship.
In normal disaster conditions, yes.
Yeah.
But this is a kill-a-death, baby.
The funny thing is, even after Titanic sank, Olympic underwent some upgrades to make it safer. Like they raised the double bottom up along the sides. Wonderful. And they did some other stuff. They raised the height of the bulkheads and all that. And the press after the sinking of Titanic stated that her builders had finally realized the quest of an unsinkable ship, even after Titanic sank.
All right, this one's
HMS unsinkable too.
HMS hubris.
I mean, to be fair,
operation cannot possibly fail a second time.
I mean, to be fair, this is my next part in the notes. So, Olympic was, the first to be built and launched. She was completed by May 31st, 1911. Began her maiden voyage on June 14th, 1911, which, fun fact, is also apparently Trump's birthday. So I don't know what to make of that. Olympic was a success. Of course, and her first few voyages went well. But on her maiden voyage in New York, she had a small incident. A couple of, basically there was one bit where like a tug got caught in her propeller wash and almost got like smashed under the stern. And then at the same time, she like scraped along the side of the dock very slightly and rubbed off some paint as she was being.
You're good.
Yeah.
You're good. Back it in. Stop.
And it's funny because you can see there's a photo of Olympic doing this, and you can just see like it's still touching the pier, and there's just people standing at the corner of the pier. Like, I think that'll buff out.
Nice and easy now. Nice and easy.
Old timey NTSB guys.
Gotta fold in the mirrors.
All right, cut it.
And Smith was captaining the ship at the time, of course. Because So
wouldn't that have been the pilot's fault though?
Yeah. I mean, Smith was on the bridge, but there would have been a pilot on board, so that was a whole thing. But Olympic went on to have a successful career. It served in World War I as a troop ship. It rammed and sank a German U-boat. Late in Olympics career, I forgot when exactly. I don't remember dates. It was sailing in fog off of the East Coast, and it ran down the Nantucket lightship. It split the ship in half. And most of the crew on board died.
Imagine seeing that prow bearing down on you.
You're supposed to go
just coming at you out of the fog.
The light is not the place you go. You go around the light, and you don't go straight towards it.
Well, the thing is, at that point, the helmsman was a moth.
So. Construction, Titanic, of course, was built at Harland and Wolff shipyards in Belfast, I guess Ireland at the time. The keel was laid March 31st, 1909. The hull was built on a slipway under this huge ass gantry that they had been built specifically for the Olympic class liners. It provided a solid platform for cranes and other tools and stuff to build the ships. It had 2 slipways. Titanic and Olympic were being built alongside at one point for a lot of that time. Some 15,000 workers helped to build Titanic, of course, and it was dangerous and difficult work. Safety was basically an afterthought. Most of it was done, the work was done without like the protective gear. They didn't have hard hats. I even saw a picture of like a guy, doing ship breaking at the time, doing the thing with the welding, like cutting stuff, and he wasn't wearing anything.
Just close your
construction in
eyes.
the nude.
Yes, I'm out here with
Sparks
with
everywhere.
acetylene torch in nature,
Yeah.
As God,
fuck corneas.
as God intended.
Don't need them.
And during Titanic's construction, there were 246 injuries, 28 of them severe, with like crushed arms and fingers, and apparently severed arms.
Oh my God!
Weight
I
savings.
wrote in my notes, "Shake hands with danger."
Yes.
You can't. You lost your arm.
Shake hands with danger.
Good point.
In all, 6 workers died on the ship itself during its construction, and another 2 in the yard during the construction. So once the hull was complete up to the superstructure, the ship, still largely unfinished, was launched backwards from the slipway on May 31st, 1911. During the launch, a shipyard worker was struck by a piece of wood as it was being, as all this was happening, and he was rushed to a hospital and later died of his injuries. So he became
Ill-fated, cursed ship.
Yep.
Fun fact: they didn't christen Titanic. White Star Line didn't. Harland and Wolff didn't do that with their ships. They were said to just build them and push them out.
Cursed ship.
Yep. On to the next one.
Hubris against the sea gods.
Oh, I was like, well, you don't have time for christening because you got to get everyone over to start building the next ship, which is slightly bigger.
That
They
is
didn't
true.
christen it because the Titanic was a Muslim.
So yeah, once Titanic was launched, it alternated between a wharf and a dry dock. She was being fitted out, the boilers and engines are installed, and blah blah blah. The fittings and interiors are put in place. So as Olympic was completed first and had already been sailing by the time Titanic was launched, they observed a bunch of stuff that they wanted to improve. So they took those things and they applied them to Titanic. This including getting rid of Titanic's B-deck promenades, filling them with more cabins, expanding the a la carte restaurant, which had proved to be extremely successful on Olympic, adding a whole new cafe, the Cafe Parisien. The layouts of other spaces were changed, a whole different layout for the Turkish bath and a bunch of other stuff. And because of the changes to B-deck, they had to rip off a bunch of plating along B-deck and put new plating on with a new layout of windows. And also as well, they had to add portholes here and there, and there were other changes. And apparently these were also the basis of like some really dumb conspiracy theories about the ships being switched, because people would be like,
guy shot JFK
Right.
from one of them.
Yeah.
Because people would be like, well, in this photo, this ship has 16 portholes. In this photo, it has 14. Why is that? It must be that they were switched,
Mm.
So, typical wonderful conspiracy theorist thinking. So, there's another big claim about Titanic, which is that it had weak steel or rivets. Basically the idea is Harland and Wolff, or the White Star, cheaped out with the steel, which, considering how conservative they were with other things, that's probably easy to believe. Basically they used substandard materials and steel that was high in carbon content, leading to brittle metal. But the fact is that I think it's technically true that the steel on Titanic wasn't the best. Like, there was more like carbon and whatnot. But the caveat is that all of the steel back then was like that.
Yep.
Mm.
But compared to modern steel, sure. And, it's true that some of the iron rivets that were tested, they brought up from the wreck and tested, they didn't hold up very well. But
Let's see you hold up so well after 90 years on a seabed,
I was about to
Yeah.
say.
And, the Titanic had regular steel rivets that, they met the quality of standards and shipbuilding practices at the time. The hull plates were the same. They were tested back then before installation by the Board of Trade. I know you can't trust the Board of Trade at this point, but, it met the standards of the time. And even modern analysis is showing that Titanic's plates were plenty strong. This misunderstanding in large part is due to it's the media basically, like they hear Titanic had steel that wasn't as good as modern. What, you said it didn't have good steel? I don't know how much the carbon content would have contributed to the sinking, though. It hit an iceberg. That's kind of heavy.
Yeah, it's like a perfectly adequate ship for its time. That's sort of the impression I've gotten, is that it was fine.
Yeah, that is true. I mean, it basically it was fine. It was, by all standards and accounts, a fine ship. And like I said, Olympic sailed for however many until the late 30s and ran into a bunch of shit, and she was fine.
It's fine so long as you hit it directly on the prow. So essentially, go to ramming speed and don't turn, and the Titanic's fine.
On his reign of terror, smashing every boat in its way, straight through New York Harbor.
The Olympic is like a bear. You have to put it down because it gets a taste for other ships.
Yeah,
it's tasted blood now.
Speaking of running into things, the Hawk collision. So on September 20th, 1911.
Next slide, please.
Oh yeah, next slide. Oh wait, that's this slide. Yep. I need to keep up. So on September 20th, 1911, during her fifth voyage, Olympic was sailing through the Solent under the command of Captain Smith. She was running parallel with the British cruiser HMS Hawk. Olympic apparently began to make a wide turn. At the same time, the Hawk was sailing pretty close and probably got caught in Olympic's, the dynamics around the hull, and unable to take evasive action. The Hawk it had a bow designed for ramming, basically. It just slammed straight into the Olympic on her starboard side, on the stern, just under the aft well deck. And it created this huge, V-shaped gash above the waterline, as well as some damage below. Two of Olympic's watertight compartments were flooded, and a propeller shaft was bent. And one of the propellers was damaged as well. Olympic was patched up over the next 2 weeks and returned to Belfast, and was fully repaired over 6 weeks. Of course, this led to delays for Titanic. Due to
really messed up the Hawk, though. Look at that on the top right. Squished that bow over to the right-hand side.
Yeah. The Hawk, of course, survived as well, but I'm sure it was very costly to fix.
You've angered the ship.
Yeah, this is when Olympic gets the taste for blood, and after that it sets out onto the open ocean in search of more things to run into.
Of course, delays due to the Hawk mishap and then urgent need for repairs. Titanic's fitting out was delayed while Olympic was repaired, primarily due to the fact that it was decided to save time by replacing Olympic's damaged propeller shaft with one meant for Titanic. The delays wouldn't end here, though. On February 24th, 1912, Olympic lost a propeller blade while sailing from New York. Sometimes ships would just throw propeller blades.
Just
weight savings.
Yep. And
oh man, those are really just riveted on, huh? Because it can't be cast in one piece or whatever, so they're just attached.
That looks like a bolt to me.
Yeah, well, the center propeller was one solid cast piece, but the wing propellers, no, they were giant blades that were bolted on with huge bolts, and they could be changed in their pitch depending on what they wanted.
Huh. Interesting.
But because
I like the 6 foot diameter bolt there.
Yeah. But because of the throw-in propeller blade, they decided to take one from Titanic. And that just delayed Titanic further to the point where originally Titanic was meant to sail on March 20th 1912. But because of all these delays in the Hawk and the propeller incident, Titanic was pushed to April 10th, 1912 for a maiden voyage.
Hmm.
Titanic was effectively completed on April 2nd, 1912, mere 8 days before her maiden voyage. So they were cutting it close. So Titanic went on her sea trials April 12th. The sea trials were held from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. They consisted primarily of running the ship to various speeds and making various maneuvers under different conditions. Backing up, going forward, having the engines at different speeds and all that, with and without the center propeller.
Getting the smaller boat and destroying it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Trying to quench its bloodlust, unable to quench its bloodlust.
Yeah, they wanted to get a full rundown, basically, on how many ships Titanic could kill.
She is hungry for a ferry.
Just painting
Bring
one of
her
the
a catamaran.
one of the like flying tigers, like eye and jaw with the teeth on the side of the bow.
It's got
That'd be
it's
cool.
like the side of a bomb or whatever. It's got how many?
Yeah.
Three barges and a car float, and the Staten Island ferry.
So, one example is that they did a full stop test. Basically, from 18 knots, they reversed the engines as quickly as they could. It took just over 3 minutes to come to a full stop over the course of 3,000 feet. It was actually a fairly short stopping distance for a ship her size. They said that the Titanic had performed extremely well during her trials, passed flying colors. Once the trials were done, Titanic set sail for Southampton and arrived there after midnight at the end of April 3rd.
Getting into ice season.
Yeah. So at this time, something else was happening. Coal miners were striking for a minimum wage in the UK and I think America.
Ungrateful.
So when Titanic arrived in Southampton, it was in the middle of this huge coal strike. It had begun on February 29th, 1912. They demanded a minimum wage. The unions had about 10 million in their coffers at the start of the strike, used to provide pay for the striking workers. Of course, the strike had a ripple effect. The coal dwindled, ships had to be laid up because no coal. Which meant that employment among the ship's crews increased, and many of the ships ended up getting tied up around the Southampton docks. Many of them side by side, they'd be doubled up. Including some of the American Line ships, which are near Titanic's berth. One being called the New York, another was the Philadelphia, the St. Louis, the St. Paul. These are also near Titanic. The strike itself wouldn't delay Titanic's voyage, at least not directly. We'll get to that. But it did force White Star to pull what coal they could from other ships in order to fill Titanic's bunkers. The strike began to reach its limits, with the companies claiming the workers couldn't hold out much longer and the unions claiming they could, at least another 2 weeks. But, soon the workers themselves started breaking the picket lines and returned to work on their own. Well, apparently with 30,000 returning to work by April 3rd and another 10,000 the next day.
God damn it.
God damn it.
On April 6th, in a 440 to 125 vote, the Miners' Federation ended the strike.
Boo.
So, at this point, Titanic had its crew and officers pretty much laid out. Most of the crew signed on for the maiden voyage the day the coal strike ended. Usually it took crew some getting used to the new design of the new ships, but some of the crew had already sailed on Olympic, so they basically knew Titanic already in that sense.
Let's meet the crew.
Yeah, many of the crew came from a densely packed portion of Southampton. A lot of them would die in the sinking, and that led to a huge part of the local population of Southampton being gutted because of it. It hit them pretty hard.
Can we pause for a second to talk about on the bottom left, the surviving crew? How sick that guy's White Star Line sweatshirt is.
Oh yeah, that's pretty dope. I want that. Yeah,
I want that White Star Line shirt. Is that what color do you suppose that is? Is that red? Be
I think
cool.
they would have been black or blue. I don't recall.
It's like
still though,
it's like a varsity sweatshirt.
very like Steve Zissou. I
Yeah.
like it a lot.
The Titanic's crew comprised of several departments. The deck department that included the captain and officers, the abled seamen, the no dirty jokes, please. Oh, please, you can make a couple.
Yeah.
Why would we do that?
Yeah. Very
This
serious
is a clean.
podcast.
This is a clean podcast.
Yeah, this is a family podcast.
Yeah.
That's right.
The
Maybe
quartermasters.
single people listen to this podcast. We don't know. We don't want to know.
The quartermasters were part of that department. The people, they were at the helm, the steering the wheel and, making sure not to hit things, I guess, keeping the ship on track.
Issuing the cool sweaters.
Yes.
Yeah. The lookouts and the various other duties around the ship. And then there was the engine department. These are the engineers, the greasers, the firemen, the trimmers. Firemen shoveled coal, the trimmers moved it around. The greasers, kept the engines lubed up, made sure they worked nice and good.
Nice.
And
I have a drop for this.
also electricians and others and people involved with running the technical side of the ship. And then there were
oils.
yeah. And then there were the victualling departments. They were separated according to class. Each class had its own stewards, cooks, they were called
Assigned by
stewardesses.
level of like snootiness and Italianness, respectively.
Basically. Now the Titanic had 8 officers, including Smith. The other officers were Chief Officer Henry Tingle Wild, First Officer William McMaster Murdoch, Second Officer Charles Herbert Lightoller, Third Officer Herbert John Pittman, Fourth Officer Joseph Groves Boxhall, Fifth Officer Harold Godfrey Lowe, and Sixth Officer James Paul Moody.
That's too many officers. You got to have fewer officers, I think.
Oh, they'd come in useful later.
I've just found that White Star Line sweatshirt, and you can get one from the production of Titanic, the Kevin Costner movie, for a mere £700.
I was also looking at it, and all the ones I found were the kerning is wrong.
Oh, bummer.
Yeah, you need that like hand embroidered sort of thing.
Yeah, you need the it has to be like the wider, it's the old timey sort of. There's something je ne sais quoi about old type, especially like sans serif,
Right.
in the pre-Helvetica
absolutely.
era, where everything was just slightly different.
On board was the Guarantee Group. They were when ships first sailed, they would have a group of people from the shipyard come aboard. This included then the new chief designer Thomas Andrews, along with other people from various Holland and Wolff departments, to just make sure the ship was working and all that. Sadly, none of the 9-member Guarantee Group survived the sinking.
Oh.
Then there's Captain Smith himself. He was born in Hanley, Staffordshire, England, January 27th, 1850. He kind of grew up, eventually going on the course of becoming a seaman, basically. In 1887, he married. He had a daughter. He joined the White Star Line in 1880, starting as 4th officer on the Celtic, or the Celtic, I don't really know. 1887, he got his first command aboard the Republic. He earned his extra master's certificate the next year. He joined the Royal Naval Reserve and retired from the RNR in 1905 with the commander rank.
All of these guys were like, to captain these, you had to be essentially like available for the Navy to just like press gang you whenever.
Yeah. Starting in 1895, Smith was captain of the Majestic for 9 years, including a brief service during the Boer War, where he was awarded the Transport Medal. Smith gained a reputation with passengers at the time as a safe captain, and he eventually became known as the Millionaire's Captain. Starting in 1904, he was tapped to command all of White Star Line's newest vessels for their maiden voyages, and given command of their largest ship, Baltic, in 1904.
As we've seen with the fucking Tenerife air disaster, celebrity captains and celebrity pilots, never a good idea.
Nope.
Yeah. So Smith moved to the Adriatic, and by 1911, on Olympics maiden voyage, he was one of the most experienced captains in the world at that point. He was a natural choice for Olympic. Regardless of the recent incidents with Olympic, he was given command of Titanic. It's often been claimed that Smith planned to retire after Titanic. It's hard to tell, but evidence seems to indicate that he probably did intend to retire, although exactly when, I don't know. He was 62 years old at the time, though, so, he's getting up there. Smith was paid £1,250 per year as a master, with a bonus of £200 if the year was free of accidents.
Oh, see, he's against his economic interest here, so I immediately yeah.
So,
just scraping against this iceberg and distraught because you're losing your no claims bonus.
Oh
no! Passengers on board at the time of sailing, the ship was only half booked. Actually,
wow.
It had a total passenger capacity of 2,435 if you include crew, 3,547. Of this total 3,500 capacity, Titanic had 2,200 on board for the main voyage. By the time she left Queenstown, so right away you see it could have been a lot worse.
The
first paying passenger to board Titanic was a guy named Wyckoff Vanderhoof, who boarded in.
Excuse me.
Yeah, he boarded in Belfast, and then he reboarded in Southampton, and he ended up dying in the sinking naturally. Then you had other
Wyckoff Vanderhoof.
And then you had other people.
Yeah.
You had other passengers. You had John Jacob Astor. He was the richest man on the ship, and apparently he also has my birthday. He had a pregnant wife with him. He had died, of course. Benjamin Guggenheim and his valet Victor Giglio. They died, of course. Major Archibald Butt was a passenger.
Major Butt.
Major Archie Butt.
Molly Brown, the unsinkable Molly Brown, although they called her Margaret. Father Francis Brown, he was a Jesuit priest. And a guy named Raymond Artigaidvesha. I am so sorry.
He's dead. It's okay.
Yeah, you don't need to apologize to him.
So he was Raymond was an Argentinian businessman. In 1871, he survived the fire and sinking of a ship called America. One of only 65 survivors.
We're all on a sinking ship called America.
Yeah. Well, not Alex.
Speak for yourself.
For the next 40 years, Raymond was haunted by it, and he never felt safe on another ship.
Yeah,
until Titanic.
Fair. Buddy.
Oh boy.
Titanic
by his own hubris.
Yeah.
In letters, Raymond wrote that he finally felt safe on Titanic. At least I will be able to travel, and above all, I will be able to sleep calm. And he felt that the advent of Marconi Wireless meant that he'd be safe, because the thing with the sinking that he was involved in was that the ship was close to land, but nobody came to rescue, at least not fast. So that was his big concern. Sadly,
whereas here you're in a busy shipping lane. Yeah, the ship hits something. You just sit in the smoking room smoking for an hour until the next ship along comes and rescues you.
Yeah.
Assuming the thing you hit wasn't another ship.
Now you're both sinking.
Yeah.
Sadly, of course, he would die in the sinking. There were also a few voyage cancellations. A few were known to cancel their trips. One of them was Milton Hershey chocolate fame. He canceled his trip to attend to business matters. Others included J.P. Morgan. He was slated to be on Titanic. He owned the parent company of the White Star Line, but he left for some reason. I forgot. There was novelist Theodore Dreiser, Pittsburgh steel baron Henry Frick, and Vanderbilt heir Alfred Owen Vanderbilt.
We could have had revolution of the United States in like 3 days.
Yeah.
These pricks had just been on this boat.
Apparently, Guglielmo Marconi was also offered free passage, but he decided to take the Lusitania days earlier.
Women with access to the time machine. Mr. Frick, you have to wake up. Your ship's about to leave.
I think both the heirs to the Widener fortune were on board, and they died. And Linwood Hall has been vacant ever since.
Yeah.
Then the president of the Grand Trunk Western Railroad was aboard, and I think.
Don't you mean the Grand Funk Railroad?
No,
the president of Jefferson Airplane was on board.
I'm pretty sure you mean the Grand Funk.
I believe that was Jefferson Ocean Liner at the time.
Yeah, they had to rename themselves in 1911.
They renamed themselves after the fastest way to cross the Atlantic Ocean.
So the funny thing about Marconi is that he apparently took Lusitania because he preferred the stenographer that they provided on board.
What a fucking dweeb.
And he would escape disaster again on Lusitania because he was on Lusitania's last voyage before the one that it was sunk on.
Damn.
All
We're
in
so
all,
bad at killing billionaires.
Yeah, and fascists, It's
yeah.
funny. All in all, you'd be surprised how many freaking people have claimed to have relatives who were supposed to be on Titanic and missed a boat. I was driving through Michigan. Me and some friends from my Titanic project were going through Michigan one time. We stopped at an antique store, and this guy in there started talking about how his relative missed the boat. And it's like, if you added up all the people who supposedly missed Titanic, it would sink the ship.
Hey, they overbook. It's like the airlines, right? And then you get bumped onto another ship. They give you
a
first class cabin.
On this flight, man. Don't remind me I got to fly today.
On April 10th, and I think the day before, there was a Board of Trade inspection. The Titanic had to undergo it and pass it. They had to check all their safety equipment, their life belts and flares, rockets, lifeboats, and all that stuff. Even by April 10th, the work on Titanic was just crazy because they still hadn't technically completed the ship. They were still bringing on furniture and fittings and all kinds of crap. It was even claimed that the Grand Staircase clock hadn't been installed yet, but I don't know if that's true. They were even touching up the paint. Thomas Andrews boarded at 6 a.m. By 6 a.m., most of the crew had arrived. Captain Smith left his home around 7 a.m. He got his paper from the paper boy. He arrived by 7:30. There was a formal muster of crew at 8 a.m. And it was after this that they had a lifeboat drill at around 9 a.m. Most of the officers were at the drill, along with some of the crew, not all of them. 2 lifeboats were lowered into the water. They were swung out and all that, and they were rowed around for a bit, brought back on deck. The way they brought the boats back on deck was through these electric boat winches. Although, yeah, because of course they lowered them by hand. They're just letting out the rope, but of course they needed the winches to get them back. So, passengers arrived over the course of the morning, mainly from 9:30 a.m., and many arrived via the boat trains from London or from local hotels. They would have been unloaded and boarded Titanic from berth 44, where Titanic was moored. There were gangways attached to the ship. There were also many guests who were allowed on the ship, people who weren't paying passengers, or if they were friends of passengers or journalists. They were basically allowed free run of the ship within reason.
What's the stowaway situation
Sabotage.
like? Do we think?
We don't know about that. Of course, we'll never know. I don't know of any stowaways. I mean, they were pretty strict, but of course,
people get in
now. Mainly, it was first and second class passengers. Basically, these people, the journalists and the friends and all that, they could tour the public areas. For example, second class passenger Lawrence Beasley and a friend of his, they toured first class.
Just to check it out, see what's going on.
Yeah. And apparently some were even allowed to tour third class. So basically, it was a brand new ship. People were allowed to walk around and go, wow,
Looking into third class, like, wow, those men sure are Irish.
Yep.
Can you take me to these glory holes I've heard so much about? Just for my own personal observation, you understand.
Among the last aboard Titanic at Southampton were some stokers and firemen who were late to reboard because the stokers had been allowed to go ashore if they weren't on duty. You know, they could go to the pub and all that, but they had to be back before the ship left. And, two of them, John Podesta and William Nutbean, made it onto the ship.
Wait, John Podesta, like the
Hillary Clinton
Democrat guy?
emails,
Yeah.
They made it up the gangplank at the last moment, just before it was starting to get pulled back. And at this point, 6th Officer Moody was just standing watch, being like, that's enough of this shit. So by that point, firemen and brothers Alfred Bertram and Tom Slade and a trimmer named Penny, they were rushing along the dock. And by the time they got to the gangplank, it was being pulled back. And Moody was like, he had enough. He refused to let him board. And
damn, dude.
So, they, unbeknownst to them, it was their lucky day.
Yeah, they just got some more Irishmen out of the bunker to replace them.
Come on, Finnegan, stretch those legs.
All right, so now we're sailing.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, we are. Wait,
underway.
Oh, yeah. Okay,
After merely 1 hour 42 minutes into the episode, we are away from the dock.
We're underway, yeah.
This is going to crack 4 hours.
Almost underway. So the departure.
Damn, Kyle.
There's going to be more. So the gangways are pulled back.
This is revenge for the Gulf State micro projects thing, where like we tortured Seamus. Now Kyle is torturing us.
Yep. That's why I made literally 60 pages of notes.
You'll be fine, you big baby.
So the crew went to their stations, blah, blah, blah. It pulled away from the dock. Passengers are being happy and calling blah, blah, blah. But as Titanic was rounding the corner, being guided by tugs, into the deep water channel, the pilot on board named Boyer, he ordered the engines slow ahead. And of course, so they started going slow ahead. Only 2 outer wing propellers would have been turning, not the center one. And as the propellers are turning, the ship was moving. There was a complex series of forces around the ship in the water. Like what happened with the Hawk. But
hard to maneuver these things.
Yeah, Titanic was meant to leave by noon, but I think it was 15 minutes late. But it was about to be even later. So as Titanic was passing, the various docks, she passed 2 of the ships docked side by side, one of them being the New York. As Titanic passed, the dynamics of the water flowing around put stress on the New York's moorings, and they started to snap with loud reports. Some of the ropes flew backwards into the dock, almost hitting people.
Cursed ship.
Yeah, already hungering for smaller ships.
As Titanic continued to pass by, and remember, the New York is only there because of the coal strike. So, we're seeing how events are coming together to form this, put Titanic on this path. So, as Titanic passed by, the New York's stern swung out into the channel. Titanic's port engine was ordered to reverse to try to push the New York away. The tug Vulcan was nearby. It was ordered by someone to move between the New York and the Titanic and the
just get in between these two things.
Yeah, and Captain Gale was like, fuck that.
No.
And he decided to attach a line to the stern of the New York instead, which immediately snapped. And then he attached a second line, and this held, and the Vulcan was able to slowly pull the New York away, or at least arrest its movement.
Unfortunately, this aroused the Titanic's bloodlust.
Yeah.
It never got to kill that tugboat, and as such, it had to kill everyone else aboard.
That's why they were gone so fast. Is Titanic was excited to go get to New York Harbor and whack right into the Staten Island ferry.
Just aiming directly for the Statue of Liberty.
Yeah.
Feasting on car floats.
So the New York came within about 4 feet of hitting Titanic by some accounts. But finally, the Titanic started to reverse a bit. The New York finally pulled away. Titanic backed up for a bit, assisted by tugs. The New York was swung around and pulled to the other side of the dock, as you see in the diagram. Top right, of course. So once all was in order, though, Titanic began steaming down the river again. Probably some have claimed that it was delayed about an hour, but it was probably more like 15 minutes, maybe half an hour. The reaction from passengers varied. Some were like, one passenger remarked as it was happening, "Now for a crash."
Oh, God.
Comically, like, wiping my brow of sweat.
Yeah, I've been Joker-fied, but 1912 style.
Yeah. First class passenger Jacques Futrell said, "Well, she got that out of her system anyway."
Oh, no.
Oh, no. You thought the bloodlust was over?
One Norman Chambers, on the other hand, he knew it was up. He said that it was an evil omen.
Cursed
Yeah,
ship.
cursed
ship. Cursed ship. Man's hubris.
It'll get you, kids.
So yeah,
I would simply sail on a ship that was not cursed.
Oh, yeah, me too.
Yeah.
I guess I'm just built different than
Yeah.
all the dead people.
R.I.P. to your great grandma, but I'm just built different.
next slide, please.
All right.
As all this was happening, there was a coal fire going on below decks.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, it's called a steam
That's gotta
engine. That's
move.
supposed to
That's
happen.
supposed to happen. Yeah.
Duh.
So coal fires were not uncommon on ships of the time. You had these big bunkers full of coal. Sometimes it would self-combust, and they would start to smolder. This happened in Titanic's case. There's a small coal fire in the forward starboard bunker, boiler room 5. That's marked on the plans here, where the fire would have been.
I'm just
roughly.
looking at all the coal bunkers, and they've actually run out of letters. They go like, there's coal bunker RSTUV. This starts in W, and then the one after Y is a beta. Just incredible.
Wow.
That's a lot of coal.
I have a
Yeah.
question.
Big ship, Alice.
Presumably, this is all the same grade of coal, right?
Presumably.
So why are there dividers in the coal bunker?
Well, the main reason is that these are watertight bulkheads.
Oh, I see.
And then of course they were divided on the lower levels by the by the passageways and such.
Why does it just say do in the bits in the middle?
Oh, that means ditto. Boilers. It says boiler.
okay.
A quick aside, a friend of mine named Matt DeWinkler he's been making his own set of plans for the last 2 years, and these are some of the samples of that. Those should be released soon. So
what's up with this fire?
So the fire.
So what's up with this fire?
So it had been burning since Belfast, basically. It had probably been going around 10 days by the time it was put out. It's important to note, though, that this wasn't really like a massive raging fire. It was probably a spot of smoldering coal, but it was up against the bulkhead, I think. The trimmers dug through the coal bunker. They prioritized using coal from this bunker in order to empty it. Finally the fire was put out. It would eventually be put out on April 13th. It was when they cleared out the coal. Apparently, the fire had left a bit of a scorch mark on the steel watertight bulkhead
with a demon's face on it.
Yeah.
There was a slight bulge. It's unclear. Obviously, I personally don't think it contributed to any failure in the bulkhead or anything like that. I don't think it ever failed. In the proximate words of a leading fireman, Fred Barrett, he said the bulkhead was damaged from the bottom. The bottom of the watertight compartment was dinged aft and the other part dinged forward. Another fireman said that he could see where the bulkhead had been red hot. All the paint and everything was off and it was dented. So they got some black oil and rubbed it on there.
Well, this is another one of the conspiracies, right? Is they were speeding because of the coal bunker situation. They wanted to get to port where they could fight the fire more effectively.
Yeah, and that wasn't even true. I mean, they were fighting it, and they had it out before the sinking.
Yeah, and they were speeding because they wanted to get to New York Harbor and mow down a railroad tug.
Yeah.
And get that cool trophy.
Yeah.
Yeah, and of course, in the last, this leads to one of the dumber chapters in Titanic, like documentary crap, because like in the last couple of years, on the top right, there's that photo of Titanic that was taken in Belfast, and there was another photo, and you see that little mark, that dark mark in the circle. So the documentary tried to claim that the coal fire was a big factor in the sinking. It said that, the main piece of evidence was the photos. Oh, this smudge is a scorch mark caused by the coal fire. Reality is that it's just a reflection. I mean, the mark is nowhere near where the fire was. I mean, if that had been a scorch mark, that would have meant the mailroom was on fire.
Mm.
And it was a lot of stuff like that. Like, they claim the fire was never extinguished. It was. They claim that the fire was hushed up. They didn't mention it to the passengers, but why would you? So they could panic.
Mm-hmm.
It was claimed
I'm just going to terrify you, but I don't mean to alarm you, but there may be a coal fire or coal fires.
Also, the ship has an unquenchable lust for blood, and you're next.
Yeah.
It was claimed that it was covered up at the British inquiry. It wasn't. I just don't think it was talked about much. It was claimed that the fire began to spread. It got worse. Didn't. It was claimed that Titanic was short on coal. Also not true. It had reserve coal for up to 1.8 days at 21 knots or even slower. It was claimed that Thomas Andrews believed the ship would survive. No, he knew it was doomed from the moment he saw the damage and did the calculations. It was claimed that the fire damaged bulkhead gave way, but that's probably not true. There are other explanations, because basically the fireman Fred Barrett had seen a wall of water rushing through the boiler room in that area at the time during the sinking, and he hightailed it out of there. But they like to claim that this is because the bulkhead collapsed, but it probably may have came from the door of the bunker collapsing or something like that, because the bunker was flooding at the time, and the bottom left, that's one of the bunker doors.
Firemen destroyed with facts and logic.
Yes.
At any rate, because of the coal fire and because they were using more coal from this starboard bunker, Titanic took on a port list of about 2.3, 2.5 degrees or so. And it had that for the entire rest of the voyage. You see at the bottom right, it leaned about that much.
Imagine playing squash on a 2.3 degree incline.
Yeah, I would.
Voyage ruined, literally unplayable.
Takes away some of the romance of the voyage when you realize, that entire time everyone was like just leaning slightly. Yeah, sure. Did they capture that in the movie? I never seen the movie.
No.
Yeah, you see Kevin Costner like leaning slightly.
Yeah, if you want to watch the movie and make it more accurate, what you should do is lean your television over like one point.
Just do a bit of a Dutch angle. Yeah.
Next slide. So, at this point, Titanic is sailing towards Cherbourg, France for her first stop. The crew settled into their routine, the passengers too. Down in boiler room 5, that they were still fighting the fire. Chief engineer Joseph Bell decided it was time to do something about it for good, so he ordered leading fireman Fred Barrett to begin the efforts to extinguish the fire. And of course, that's when they began to really prioritize use of the coal from that bunker and all that. And also at the time, they were also using a hose to pour water into the bunker, so they weren't just digging it out. Titanic dropped anchor near Cherbourg around 6:30 p.m. April 10th. The tender's nomadic in traffic, specifically built for Olympic class liners, delivered more passengers.
I like the tenders. They're cute.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Tendies. you will.
Little little miniature Titanics.
One of them's still
Yeah.
around, right?
Yeah, the Nomadic is still there in Belfast. It's been restored.
Aw, sweet.
It's the last remaining White Star vessel.
Didn't they they got bought by someone, right? A few years ago. Or
Yeah.
Part of Cunard now, I think.
Yeah, but they're owned by, I want to say, Royal Caribbean. Could be wrong on that.
Carnival.
There we go.
Carnival owns everything. They even own Cunard.
Oh, the money have fallen.
So among the passengers who boarded was Molly Brown. They went to dinner and all that, and Titanic weighed anchor around 8:10 p.m. and it set sail for Queenstown, Ireland. By late morning, April 11th, Titanic dropped anchor off the coast of Queenstown harbor by 11:30 a.m. And apparently by the morning of the 11th, some passengers were writing letters that could be sent off by the mail, including Chief Officer Wild, who wrote in a letter saying, "I still don't like this ship. I have a queer feeling about it."
Just you wait, buddy.
Oh,
I'm experiencing some foreshadowing.
yes. We're queering the Titanic.
Over the next 2 hours, the tenders Ireland and America ferried new batches of passengers to Titanic, along with cargo and mail. And some passengers also left the ship. Some only booked passage at that point, including Father Francis Brown and his Kodak vest pocket camera. He used it to take pictures. And, luckily he got off the ship, and there's some of the best pictures we have of Titanic's, final time near the shore, sailing and all that. Brown had befriended some passengers on board in first class, and they offered to pay him passage all the way to New York. But when he asked his parish in Ireland about it, they were like, "Get off that ship." So he got off that ship.
And who said the Roman Catholic Church was good for nothing?
Yeah.
Titanic weighed anchor around 1:30 p.m. April 11th and set sail for the final time. There were 2,208 people aboard, 891 crew and officers, 324 first class, 284 second class, that's 284, and 709 third class. So, Titanic passed Daunt's Rock light vessel by 1:55 p.m.
Crushing it entirely.
Yeah.
Opening its gaping maw.
Yeah.
April 11th. When ships passed Daunt's Rock, this marked the official starting point to the transatlantic crossing. April 12th, the next day, they begin with the usual routines and breakfast. But apparently not all was well on the ship. They were having trouble with the ship's heating systems. The heating was done a couple of ways. One was through the use of electric heaters that there were in a lot of cabins, mainly in first class and public rooms. And another was using steam radiators. They were like in floors, along floors and stuff. And but those were mainly in public spaces. But most extensively were the ship's ventilation systems. Air was basically sucked in through these huge electric fans and forced through a series of steam tubes to heat it before being forced through the ton of ventilation shafts. And apparently this didn't work very well. Some passengers complained of too much heat, some of too little. And apparently they weren't fussing around with that. And Andrews was concerned about it for much of the voyage. First class didn't worry too much about it because they had the heaters. In the Marconi suite, the Marconi operators Jack Phillips and Harold Bride were working, receiving messages between ships and shore. It was at this point that they received one of the first ice messages from the La Touraine. It read in part, "Dense fog since the night crossed thick ice field. Paris saw another ice field and 2 icebergs." Obviously at that time of year, it wasn't unusual. They expected ice. by this
Yeah,
point,
it's the ice season. The
Yes.
stuff starts to melt, and by this point, it's already drifted into the path of the shipping corridors.
yeah. Later that night, Captain Smith dined with Bruce Ismay in the a la carte restaurant. Ismay invited some people back to his suite for a game of bridge. Earlier that day, lists were posted for the different departments showing what lifeboats they would be assigned to, with the intention of having a crew muster the next day for the boats. By midnight, the Titanic's 21st boiler was brought online after being fired for most of the day. Because at this point, not all the boilers were running. The boiler room 1 was still offline, and boiler room 2, it seemed, was also mostly offline. By noon on April 13th, Titanic had covered about 519 miles with an average speed of 20.91 knots over the course of 24 hours. As they brought these more boilers online, Titanic was sped up from 72 to 75 RPM. Over the course of that, they just kind of sped up a bit. Also, a little incident occurred in first class when passenger Irene Harris slipped and fell while descending the grand staircase and broke her arm.
What about linoleum?
Yeah.
She had to be taken care of by the ship's Dr. O'Loughlin. And as far as the other passengers were concerned, this was the event of the crossing.
Terrifying. Well,
First ship.
anyway,
Hungered for blood, and I'd only got an arm.
so far.
On the night of April 13th, the transformer in the silent room of the Marconi suite started having issues. It ended up being due to a short because a lead had come in contact with a metal part of the wooden enclosure. And the Phillips and Bride were unable to use it. The maintenance manual called for the Marconi equipment it explicitly stated that operators should not attempt to diagnose or fix the faults that might be in the system, and instead to use an emergency set. But Phillips and Bride, they weren't having any of that crap, so they decided to take it upon themselves to diagnose and fix the issue. They spent a good few hours doing it, and by 5 a.m. on April 14th, they had it fixed, basically by using some electrical tape. The Marconi equipment was up and running. There may have been something of a backlog of passenger messages that they worked through.
Send more cigarettes again.
Ow, my
Desperately
arm.
send more cigarettes.
More cigars.
Broke my arm on the stupid linoleum.
Send more cigarettes.
Yeah.
Have resorted to cannibalism.
Crush any sign of strikes.
Yes. Arrange for a tramp steamer to cross our path in New York Harbor.
Please move Statue of Liberty into path of ship.
So on April 3rd,
And they're sending these in Morse too, by the way. Takes a long ass time.
I wouldn't want to do that.
Mhm.
So on April 13th, passenger Elizabeth Lines had been sitting in the first class reception room, and she saw Captain Smith and Ismay come in and converse at a nearby table. Apparently, they were men of habit because they kept sitting at that table on multiple days. So at any rate, Lines overheard their conversation, particularly when they started talking about the ship's daily run. It was a common topic for people to talk about. That's all they had to talk about on ships back then, how much distance it covered. It was clear that Ismay was excited about the apparent success of Titanic. He was apparently gushing about it, just going over and over about how great the steam pressure was, and that Titanic was beating Olympic's time. And
Some guy next to him thinking, I wish this guy would shut the fuck up about this boat. And the the monkey paw girls.
Possibly Smith, because reportedly Smith just sat there and listened to him, and he didn't reply the entire time.
Oh, damn.
Ismay was reported to have said, he was repeating himself, you see, the boilers are standing the pressure. Everything is going well. The boilers are working well. We can do better tomorrow.
At this point, you could get cocaine over the counter at this time.
Yeah.
He's got a parasocial relationship with the captain.
World's earliest WTYP fan, 1912.
So Ismay reportedly said, "We will beat the Olympic and get into New York on Tuesday," because they were scheduled to get there on Wednesday morning. Ismay also believed apparently that they could squeeze a bit more speed out of Titanic by putting more steam on. Or once Ismay finished, they got up and he said, "Come on, Captain, we'll get somebody and go down to the squash courts." If Smith had any reservations about Ismay, his statements, he didn't show it.
They played squash on a list.
By noon the 14th, Titanic's run over that last 24 hours had been 546 miles with an average speed of 22.06 knots. With that being the best run yet. Titanic so far had traveled 1,549 miles of her total 2,891 nautical mile course. At the rate Titanic was sailing, it's very possible that she could have arrived in New York before the scheduled arrival of 5 a.m. Wednesday the 17th. She could have gotten in maybe on Tuesday night if she had kept up the pace. That point is still hotly debated. At another point, Ismay also met with Chief Engineer Joseph Bell in his cabin to discuss the ship's speed. Ismay apparently wanted Titanic to be driven to full speed, if only for a few hours, if the weather was good enough on Monday, the 15th, or the 16th. The officer
It just seems very, very excitable. He seems almost quite juvenile about this.
Yeah, Ismay did see his personality did seem like he was very excitable during the voyage. I mean, by all accounts, he was actually a pretty nice guy.
We'll get into some of the portrayals of him in like popular culture later, but like, yeah, no, he just seems very, very like enthused.
Yeah, on a big boat. I'm on a big boat going fast. It's cool. I'm on a big boat.
You should see Roz on trains. It's just like this.
He maybe was a bit naive. I don't know, but yeah, I mean, he seemed to be pretty nice. He cared about the passengers. He checked on people all the time. And for a guy who basically owned the ship, I guess that's notable. The officers also wanted to raise the ship's speed, though, because they wanted to see what she could do. A big reason for this was something called the slip table. It was a document that was meant to allow the crew to gauge how fast the ship was going just by how many revolutions the engines were running at. And they wanted to go faster to try to complete the slip table. So basically that was planned for April 15th or 16th, not the 14th. The day of the 14th started out, bright and clear. For several days, Titanic had been sailing on calm seas. It had been gradually
nothing to look at, totally flat blue expanse. Nothing to do, nothing to talk about. Play some bridge, smoke some cigars, send some telegrams.
Yep.
Yeah, and
sending a midnight telegram. You up? Stop.
More cigarettes.
They could send the fucking right flyer out over the Atlantic and have them drop some cigarettes over the side to me.
I mean, hey, if they wanted cigarettes, they could buy them in the first class smoke room.
Yeah, but they couldn't buy them by the crate, which is what you need.
That's true.
That's true. You need more cigarettes.
No, I need my cigarettes, my special brand.
My specific cigarettes.
Jazz cigarettes.
It had been increasing her speed. Because it was a Sunday on the 14th, church services were held across the ship. Smith conducted services in the first class saloon. Assistant purser Reginald Barker.
I forgot that when you're a captain of a ship, you can just kind of do whatever.
Yeah.
Just be like, I'm a priest now.
I'm a priest.
But even the purser, Reginald Barker, he conducted services for second class. And second class passenger Thomas Biles, he was a pastor. He also conducted his own Catholic mass in the second class library and held services for third class. During the morning, the remaining 3 main double-ended boilers were lit to be brought online once they were up to temperature and pressure. This left 5 single-ended boilers in boiler room 1 yet to be lit. By this point, by the time Titanic hit the iceberg, she had 1 entire boiler room that probably wasn't being used. Just
a bunch of guys standing around.
Yep.
Job easy.
It was mainly meant to be used in port, I believe. So yeah, and and that's one of the myths of Titanic. So yeah, yeah,
Need the extra boiler to get up to ramming speed.
Yeah. It's like the turbo button on an old Pentium.
Yeah.
Apparently, when Smith was asked if he would slow down the ship for ice, Smith was reported to have said, "On the contrary," and said that they would speed through the ice field. So
it
yeah,
speaks to me in my dreams.
So yeah, the myth of the extra lit boilers. Yeah, it's the 97 film famously shows Smith saying, "We're speeding up. We just ordered the last boilers lit," and the simple answer is that no. All accounts point to the last boiler room, or the first one technically being unlit.
Why even bother? They were making pretty good speed.
Also, once you light those boilers, I'm sure it takes like 10 hours for them to come up to pressure.
Yeah, they needed to. Yeah, it took all day for them to bring them up to temperature and pressure. However, there's possible evidence that at least 2 of the boilers in Boiler Room 1 may have at least been fired up during the sinking. A possible explanation, if it's true, is that it was done after the collision. Once it became clear that the forward boiler rooms were flooding, maybe they lit the boilers and were trying to get them up to pressure.
In effort to get the hell out of there.
Yeah, to keep the lights going.
To get to the bottom of the ocean faster.
Right.
Then drive it vertically downwards.
The funny thing is, I know of a couple of shipwrecks where they went down so fast at an almost vertical angle that they literally dug themselves sticking out of the mud at the bottom of the ocean.
Oh, that rules. Wow. That's how, if I ever crash a ship, that's how I want to crash a ship.
Jesus Christ, Alice.
What? No, it's perfect. You just leave a perfect, a perfectly ship-shaped mud trench.
Oh, okay. Fantastic. No, you know what? That actually does rule. I revised my earlier thinking.
So, Ismay was reported to have said to some passengers 2 more boilers are to be opened up today. But that doesn't mean he was referring to those boilers. He could have been referring to the ones that had already been lit and they were about to be opened up to the steam lines. But
seems pretty suspicious.
But if Titanic hadn't sunk, the last boilers surely would have been lit the next day, maybe after midnight.
So you can use them in the port.
Yeah, and who knows? Maybe they did light them before midnight, and with the intention of running them the next day. But they wouldn't have
with the intention of destroying the Statue of Liberty.
But yeah, they wouldn't have been anywhere in a state to be contributing to the ship's speed. Next slide.
We're finally getting into iceberg mode.
Yes.
I'm excited.
Oh boy, this thing's not cool.
You could do it, Roz.
There we go.
So, ships on the Atlantic back then, they followed ships today follow predetermined routes or lanes. In Titanic's case, this involved a turn. Basically, when they got to a certain point, like level with New York, they were going on a kind of southwesterly course, and when they got to the corner, as it was called, they made a right-hand turn slightly straight towards New York. And Titanic turned the corner at 5:50 p.m. on April 14th, about 3 nautical miles off from the actual location of the corner.
Still pretty good for 1912 navigation.
Yes, some have claimed that it turned the corner too late, that Captain Smith intentionally delayed the turn for some reason or another, or that
conspiracy, sabotage.
Yeah, and that some officers question this. In reality, it doesn't seem to be the case. In all likelihood, Smith was just off in his calculations when he wrote down the orders for the turn. He slightly underestimated the ship's speed, probably. In the end, the turn was only off by 3 nautical miles, suggesting that Smith intended to stick closely to the course, even if imperfectly. But 3 nautical miles, this course change meant that Titanic was now heading for the iceberg, but just didn't know it yet.
Yeah, this iceberg which has taken this wandering path from the glacier.
Yeah.
Glacier, Jesus Christ.
Glacier.
I know.
It's French.
I
It's
know.
from the French for ice, glass, glacier, glacier.
I know what it's from.
So the ice warnings over the course of the 14th, she received several ice warnings.
But ice from the glacier.
Yeah.
The Coronia said that they had reported bergs and growlers. That was
What's
delivered.
a growler?
I don't know.
It's
I
a
think it's some
vagina.
bits of ice.
It's
Okay. They reported vaginas.
it's something you can take to the
Yeah.
brewery and they fill it with beer.
Get the beer. Yeah.
Texting back, yo, you seen all the pussy out here? This is a
Stop.
rated clean podcast on Apple.
The message was delivered to the bridge. Smith posted it for the officers. The Baltic 2 sent in a report saying that the Greek steamer Athenia reported icebergs and large quantities of field ice. That was delivered directly to Smith. While he was talking to Bruce Ismay then put the ice warning in his pocket and later showed it to several passengers.
Weird.
By 17
all right.
Again, this guy just had Asperger's.
Yeah.
He was just like, oh man, it's so cool that I get to be on this thing. I got to tell everybody all of the details about this thing that I'm on.
That was, and by all accounts, Ismay was generally kept apprised of the progress on the ship because, of course, he owned it. Effectively.
And because he was having a great time.
Yeah.
By 7:15 p.m., Smith asked for the paperback so he could post it in the chart room, which they did. And then another one from the America with a K, past two large icebergs.
That's the hamburger line for you.
That's the hamburger line.
I've seen Man in the High Castle.
This message was actually overheard. It was being sent to the hydrographic office in D.C., but it was never sent to the bridge. From the
Doesn't
California,
help that it was the SS America with a K.
they received the ice warning from Californian, 3 large bergs 5 miles to the southwest.
Oh, California in German is so fucked too with the K and Californian.
Oh. But this was just Californian with a C.
Oh, okay. Never mind then.
It was sent to another ship, but Titanic overheard it and it was delivered to the bridge by Harold Bride, but Smith was never made aware of it. He was down in the restaurant having dinner. Then they received a message from the Masaba, saw much heavy pack ice, great number of large icebergs, also field ice, weather good, clear.
Captain can't answer you. He's busy eating a shitload of boiled meat.
Yes.
Yeah. Last message.
The third class menu includes literal gruel. Like the menu says gruel on it.
The last message was delivered to the bridge, and Bride was sleeping by then, and Jack Phillips was busy sending messages to Cape Race. Earlier that day, it was customary to have a lifeboat drill on every crossing, usually Sundays if they could. This was planned for Titanic, but they canceled it because of high winds in the afternoon.
Good. Well, good thing we won't need them.
Yeah, you don't want to be banging those lifeboats against the hull. So in case you do need them, it's going to be like,
Yeah, but plus the ship already had a drill before it left Southampton for its certification, so they probably felt like, we don't need it.
Yeah.
So by late night, around 11 p.m., passengers were getting to bed, and they were up in the smoke room, and various other places. Some were just reading and stuff in their cabins. In the first class dining saloon, stewards are setting up tables for breakfast. First Officer Murdoch was left in charge of the bridge. Captain Smith retired to his quarters. What he was doing, who knows?
Jerking off.
Looting cases of cigarettes.
Yeah.
Yeah, his cabin is just like 90% cigarette by volume.
Other deck crew went about their duties. Quartermaster George Rowe was at his post on the docking bridge. Quartermaster Alfred Oliver was on the compass platform, by over the lounge working on a compass. Frederick Fleet and Reginald Lee were, freezing their butts off high in the crow's nest.
Watching for ice, right?
Yeah.
Doing a subpar job of it.
They were busy looking at Jack and Rose. Oh, wait, not Jack and Rose. Who are they?
Kevin Costner
and Whitney Houston.
Yeah.
Yes.
From the film, The Titanic.
Mm-hmm.
So wasn't there a thing about them not having binoculars?
Oh, I'm getting to that.
Okay.
Saves weight, Alice.
So for one thing, next slide.
Oh, now we really are getting to it.
Yeah, so there's a theory that there was a mirage that night. The sky was clear, no moon. That alone made it difficult to spot anything. You can't just spot things by starlight. The air was getting colder over the course of the day. It dropped below freezing. By that, the ocean was a flat calm, perfectly still. The water temperature, by the time of the sinking was 28 degrees Fahrenheit, well below freezing.
Fun.
No, thank you.
And so historian Tim Moulton did research on the weather in the area of Titanic on that night, and basically there were perfect conditions for a mirage. Titanic was crossing in that area from the warmer Gulf Stream to the to the colder Labrador Current, and it was cooling from the bottom up, the air. So it created a thermal inversion, most likely, and that would have probably led to a superior mirage. For the iceberg, that meant the berg was probably, it could have been obscured by the horizon until it was much closer. And for the Californian, which we'll talk about, it probably obscured some of Titanic's lights and possibly the Morse lamps between the two ships. Well, of course, we'll never know for sure, but it's a definite possibility, at least.
Sort of a nightmare scenario, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And another one of those unfortunate circumstances. So the binoculars, it was commonly, it's often claimed that the lookouts on Titanic were, if only they had binoculars, they would have seen it. And that, they were supposed to have binoculars, but they didn't have them. Frederick Fleet himself claimed at the American Inquiry that, maybe he could have spotted the berg sooner if he had binoculars. In reality, all of Titanic's officers had pairs of binoculars. Whether the lookouts were meant to be given a set is unknown. I know.
You would think that would be the people you would want to have.
Yeah,
them.
lookouts right in the name.
That was a weird thing. Like on a trip from Belfast, Second Officer Blair, he was the original second officer of Titanic before being replaced by Lightoller. So, Blair escaped, got off lucky. During the Belfast to the Southampton voyage, Blair had provided the lookouts his pair of binoculars. But Lightoller was asked by the lookouts about binoculars, but he apparently didn't think to give them his.
Good.
Kind of a dick.
I mean, Lightoller kind of was a little bit of a dick.
Yeah, and also survived and lived into the Second World War, where he was a very, very hard man, very tough man.
Yes.
Yeah.
Prickly, I think the word might be.
But apparently, Lightoller was, aside from his own, he wasn't able to find a pair. But there are caveats to this. Even if they had binoculars, lookouts often trusted their own eyes before anything else. Fleet also said that he would have only used binoculars if he thought he saw something on the horizon. And another lookout on Titanic named Hogg also stated that he depend on his eyesight before resorting to binoculars. Inquiry testimony was nearly unanimous that binoculars would have been useless for spotting ice objects like bergs under the conditions of that night. Even modern tests, people trying to look at stuff through binoculars, it's just useless. Like, imagine you're just looking ahead of you and you're looking through binoculars. You probably miss the iceberg. You're looking somewhere else.
You're looking somewhere else. You're looking for a 3-masted schooner you can wreck into.
Yeah.
So
he's shoveling Irishmen into the firebox.
So at the end of the day, I think it's safe to say that binoculars almost certainly wouldn't have done anything. They just wouldn't have been using them at the time. But now we're getting to the famous part where we talk about the exact time the disaster happens.
Yeah, you're about to say a time.
Boy.
Right. Yeah. So at 11:39 p.m. April 14th.
There it is.
What's going to happen?
Lookouts.
At 11:39, a guy asks for some ice in his drink in the bar.
Irony ensues.
Yes.
Lookouts Reginald Lee and Frederick Fleet up in the crow's nest spot a dark mast directly ahead of the ship in the water. Fleet reaches for the bell and rings it 3 times. Then he picks up the phone that was in the crow's nest. Direct connection to the bridge. After a few rings, 6th Officer Moody answered, asking, "Yes, what do you see?" "Iceberg right ahead." And Moody said, "Thank you." And then he hung up. And then he relayed...
Very polite.
Yeah, very polite. And then he relayed, "Iceberg right ahead," to Murdoch. Now, the hard to starboard order was given by Murdoch as he rushed from the bridge wing, which he was on at the time, to the navigating bridge. Which meant that Quartermaster Robert Hitchens needed to turn the helm to the left as far as it could go, so the ship began to turn. If the ship had continued turning to port, it would have ground against the berg along most of its length. And, Murdoch knew this, so as Titanic was passing the berg, he port rounded it, but that's showing later here. As Hitchens turned the wheel, he would have felt more resistance as he got closer to the going hard over. And the wheel was attached to a telemotor, which was attached to hydraulic lines that went to the steering engines at the back of the ship. And they turned the rudder. So, the steering engines would have immediately begun turning the rudder.
But as we've seen, these are sort of hard things to maneuver.
Yes, man.
Kinda. So,
Is that what it says in the inquiry? Kinda.
It gives you directions to make that noise.
Yeah.
Well, so back in the crow's nest, Reginald Lee noticed the ship beginning to turn. Basically, right after Moody had replied, "Thank you." So there's a claim that they mixed up the rudder orders, and and they're like, "Oh well, the quartermaster."
No, I meant your left.
Yeah,
My left or stage left? Stop.
and that's not true. That's just it was a random person in a book making a claim.
The ship resisted the turn because it thought that is a sloop right ahead. I need to run it down.
That's the thing, though. It actually didn't resist the turn.
Just shut up.
Titanic. Wait, actually, I'm getting to that. But the starboard versus port. In the days of sail and tillers, you would move the tiller to the left to turn right, and they just kept those orders even after you just turned the wheel to the right. So, another thing about Titanic is the rudder size. People like to say, "Oh, the rudder was too small." In fact, the rudder was actually plenty sufficient, especially if you consider how much, how much of the rudder was below the water. It was especially effective due to the central propeller, which is located directly behind the rudder, basically. Which created, in effect, a stream or jet of water that could be, directed one way or another. It should also be noted that Titanic had the same size design of rudder as Olympic, and Olympic had no problems navigating with it. I mean, she was able to quickly turn and run down a German U-boat. Couldn't get out of the way of the light ship, but she probably was trying to get to it.
Yeah,
It wasn't an accident.
Bloodlust.
Right.
And fog,
Yeah.
But there's also a photo that was taken by Father Brown from Titanic during the early part of the crossing, and you could see a serpentine S-shaped course, and it was a very sharp turn in the wake. Like, Titanic was clearly able to turn fast and effectively. So but it's the engine orders. Next, after he ordered the turn, Murdoch rushed to the main engine order telegraph to the bridge. This is the next slide, actually. And of course, there's the rudders and stuff.
Yeah.
And the turning engine. So Yeah, he ordered he rushed to the main order engine telegraph. He swung the handles to stop.
Which is cool. That's a cool thing to do. It's a cool piece of machinery to operate.
Ship's
I've always
telegraph is
wanted
cool.
to swing one of those directly to like all ahead stop or like flank speed or something.
They were really cool. They were basically how they worked is they were attached. When you move the handles, it turned a bunch of gears. These were attached to some cables and chains that ran all the way through the ship to the engine rooms or wherever they were meant to go. A bunch of massive pulley system down in the engine room. They had their own set of telegraphs. There would be an arrow pointer that would swing to stop. They would see that. They would turn the handles on their telegraph down there, which would move a pointer on the bridge, indicating that they got the order. So, the stop order was given, at least from the evidence we have. Down in Boiler Room 6, leading fireman Barrett was talking to second engineer John Hesketh when he saw a stop order on the telegraph and shouted, "Shut all the dampers." The engines couldn't be stopped or reversed on a dime, though. By the time Titanic struck the berg, it's very likely the propellers didn't even stop yet.
How far away was it? Do we know, or is it just like best guess when they?
It's difficult to say. Well, for one thing, we don't know. We don't know. It's claimed that the engine's reversed. Now, obviously, in Titanic, the scene they reversed them, and but Boxall, Fourth Officer Boxall, was the only person to testify that there was a full stern order. There were others in positions to see what order was given, and they all said it was a stop order. Quartermaster Hitchens and Oliver on the bridge gave detailed testimonies. They never mentioned full stern. Others in the engine and boiler rooms also testified to stop orders. It is known that the engines went into reverse after the collision for about a half a minute or so, and after they came to a stop. Whether this was the order referred to by Boxall or given during the collision, we'll never know. But that brings us to the timing, because, how much time did Titanic have from spotting the berg? It's often claimed that the time from the berg being spotted to the collision was 37 seconds. This is probably not accurate. It comes from a combination of accounts from survivors on the bridge and a comparison to Olympics time that it took to turn 2 points, because it's claimed that Titanic turned 2 points on the compass before hitting the berg. You have to consider other things, though, like the port rounding order.
So we don't know, basically.
Yeah, we don't know, but it's probably safe to say that they barely had any time at all. Like maybe 30 seconds, maybe less, maybe more. But
which in this context is nothing.
Yeah, I mean, by the time the berg was spotted, they were effectively right up on top of it. There was very little time to act. And it's also worth noting that there may have been some considerable time that elapsed after the ringing of the bell and before the turn order, maybe as much as 20 to 30 seconds. At any rate, there was barely any time at all, like none turn. Like Titanic, it doesn't matter how good Titanic was at turning, it just barely, it just couldn't get out of the way. So at 11:41, next slide.
Yep. Whoopsie.
The collision. This took mere seconds. The ship was going at a pretty good clip still. The iceberg would have passed by very quickly. Ice was shaved off the berg, fell on the forward well deck. Later in the sinking, passengers were seen kicking it around like soccer, playing with it.
What else are you gonna? You may as well have some fun, know.
Yeah. Most barely felt the collision. Some very much, depending on where they were. One said that it was like rolling over 1,000 marbles. The blow was glancing, but the force was enough to bend plates and pop rivet seams.
Oof.
Yeah, you can see the joints where it's like where the plate fails, right?
Yeah. But as it passed the berg, The stern began swinging to port as the berg was passing the middle. Because of Murdoch's port round order, and good thing too, probably. The berg passed close by the stern, and Quartermaster George Rowe, who was on the docking bridge over the poop deck, he thought the berg was about 100 feet high. Others described the berg as being like the Rock of Gibraltar.
I kind of love that it could still have been worse, you know?
Yeah. In Boiler Room 6, Fred Barrett was looking to the starboard side of the room, and he literally saw the iceberg damage happen. He saw water starting to pour in 2 feet above the floor plates in the room.
Nope. Don't like that.
Nope.
There are numerous stories from the collision, first class passenger Edith Rosenbaum felt several jolts and noticed the lack of engine vibrations. She looked through
the
her
joke about a guy asking for ice is sometimes presented as like an apocryphal, like a true story.
She saw a ghostly wall of light outside the window. Other people saw the same thing. First class passenger Edwin Kimball, he was in cabin D19 with his wife when the berg passed. Standing in the middle of the room, he noticed a scraping and tearing sound, and suddenly pieces of ice came in through his porthole.
Yeah.
Oh, air conditioning.
Very nice.
Yeah. It worried his wife a bit.
Yeah, it would do.
It was
really
a little
wouldn't
worrying, yeah.
I would be perturbed at this point.
Jack Thayer was getting ready for bed in C-66 when he felt the collision. It caused him to sway a bit, and he felt as if the ship was being pushed to the side slightly.
Feels as if the ship's being bullied.
Yeah, Major Arthur Pushin was getting ready for bed in C-104 when he sensed something of he sensed as if the ship had struck something, causing a slight quiver.
Little do you know.
He was immediately suspicious because he knew the sea was calm, so he dressed and left his room to investigate.
Yeah, you would not catch me in a sort of like a dressing gown situation here, I think.
No, going down in suit and tie, goddammit.
Yeah.
Liam goes down formally, doesn't go down at all.
Philadelphian Emma Bucknell was in D15 on the starboard side. She felt the jar, and then she saw the bird pass. Yep.
No birds. Do not go Bucknell, though, those fucking dweebs.
And generally that story was the same for many passengers. Many were jarred awake. Some were woken up or noticed the engines stopping. Some saw the iceberg pass, blah, blah, blah. At any rate, as this was happening, Murdoch went to the watertight door switch on the bridge. He sounded the alarm before he closed the doors. Then he turned the switch, and the watertight doors in the lowest levels started to drop. There was no big control panel like in the movie, probably. Just a switch.
Crucially, only those ones, because everything else you have to send a guy to do.
Yeah.
Poor Irishman.
Yeah. The crew in the boiler rooms also were not trapped by the doors. There were catwalks and ladders going up through the casings to E-deck in the very top.
Oh, that's handy. I was always like, that was always my nightmare about like ship sinking. Is like if they close a waterproof compartment just
trap
on you.
me in there. Yeah, no thanks. I don't need claustrophobia as I'm gonna die of exposure.
You have to do a horrible thing no one wants to do, which is climb stairs.
Shut up.
Not just stairs, but ladders.
You climb the stairs, the pusher robot is waiting for you at the top.
Of course, some crew stayed behind to draw the fires from the boilers and pump water out, even as water was rushing into like boiler room 6.
That's nice of them. I wouldn't do that shit.
Yeah, no.
A few did rush through the closing doors.
You're not going to catch me doing my job.
No, fuck that.
By about 11:42, the ship was slowing. There was a possible reversal of the engines, and then a slow ahead order for a short time, and then after that, a stop order was given, and the ship came to a stop for the last time.
F.
At 11:45 or so, they began letting off steam from the boilers. This is via large pipes on the fore and aft sides of the funnels, as you see in the picture there. It was
just for a bit of drama, so you get a lot of steam from the funnels.
So these are incredibly loud, right?
Yeah, they were unbelievably loud. They were heard all over the ship. People could barely talk to each other, even in the ship. Just a very loud, low roar.
Another thing, if you're watching the Titanic movie, you should put on a sort of overwhelmingly loud steam rushing off sound while watching the entire film.
I'm always saying
Yeah.
this.
Of course, they did this because the steam from the boilers wasn't being used, and if they didn't, kaboom.
Mm-hmm.
But once the boilers were cold, after some time, the venting stopped. Next slide. The iceberg struck the hull on the starboard side below the waterline. There was no big gash, just about 1 to 6 inch wide gaps, approximately.
That's all you need.
Yeah.
From visual inspections of the wreck and sonar mappings, we basically found that there's trace damage in the forward peak tank and the flooding the first compartment, 5 and 6 foot openings in the cargo hold on the Orlap deck, which flooded the second compartment, a 16-foot opening running across watertight bulkhead B, and a 33-foot opening across watertight bulkhead C, which flooded the third and fourth compartments. Then there was a 45-foot opening through most of the fifth watertight compartment.
So it could have survived that first glancing blow, but then it's scraping down the side is what did for it.
Yeah. And this last gash especially is what did it. 45-foot opening, that took out boiler room 6. And it also extended slightly past watertight bulkhead E into the sixth compartment, which was boiler room 5, but it only went in slightly to the coal bunker. Coincidentally, the same coal bunker that was on fire. So
Fire's out now, definitely.
But for a while, this boiler room 5 was kept dry. Like, they were able to get pumps in and keep the water low and keep the bunker closed. So for now, that room didn't flood. But the gases were spread out over about 230 feet. Even with just the 5 compartments, it was more than enough to doom the ship.
Nice.
Kill a death.
The initial flooding as seen in the diagram bottom left, those areas just started flooding immediately. So, cargo holds, peak tank, fireman's tunnel, which is the main access way between the boiler rooms.
Jeffrey's tube.
Yeah, basically. Reserve coal bunkers, boiler room 6, absolutely screwed. By 11:50, within 10 minutes of the collision, water began flooding into the mailroom on the Orlap deck. Postal workers,
Oh no, my mail.
Yeah, postal workers tried to haul sacks of mail.
Send cigarettes.
Yeah. The postal workers famously tried to haul sacks of mail to higher decks. Of course,
again, I would not be doing this shit.
Yeah, and of course, none of them survived.
Again, reason why I would not be doing this shit. Fuck your mail.
I heard something interesting, which is that if somebody were to recover mail from the Titanic, it would need to be delivered, and it would be illegal to keep it or something.
Oh yeah, that's like mail fraud. You don't want to fuck around with that. Postal inspector wearing one of those deep weather saturation diving suits.
Passengers started to get roused after the collision, obviously, either by themselves from feeling the collision or from stewards going around to wake people up. There were no alarms on the ship, no sirens, no flashing lights, no nothing.
Well, because that would be gauche.
Yeah, I was about to say.
Let's see. Next slide.
Bad news, folks. I'm going to have to leave you there. This episode's very long already and it only got longer from here on out. So if you want more Titanic, you'll have to wait until next week. Or maybe you could pirate the movie. Or you could read the Wikipedia article. I mean, it sinks. I think we all know that, right? Next week, we'll talk about the sinking part in excruciating detail. Anyway, good luck all, and good night. Or excuse me, good morning, because I release these things at 8 a.m.